Chapter 3281. Ji Tianxing didn't need to break through the encirclement. Being surrounded and attacked by so many high divine lords, he was completely capable of using the heaven-destroying sword formation to seal off the surrounding 10,000 kilometers. As long as he used the sky-destroying sword array, the 200 or so divine lords would suffer heavy casualties. Even Yang's sneak attack wouldn't endanger his life. He would fight Yang after he finished off the Wind Frost Emperor and the other divine lords. But this idea wouldn't work. This was the Yanling mountain range, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Once Ji Tianxing used the sky-destroying sword array, it would cover thousands of miles and kill indiscriminately. Plus, if he fought with Yang and the other divine lords, the shockwaves would also kill many soldiers. The Great Yan Empire was already weak and in danger. He was here to help. How could he kill hundreds of thousands of soldiers? Under such circumstances, he could only choose to break through the encirclement. He had to use his strongest power and break through the encirclement as quickly as possible. Sky Dragon Slash. Ji Tianxing chose to charge toward the south. He held the Sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and slashed out a giant sword. The resplendent golden sword lit up with the image of a divine golden dragon. It descended from the sky and slashed at the several high divine lords. The 10-some high god lords in the surroundings immediately moved to help, joining together to cast a spell to block the attack. Boom! Crack! With a deafening sound, the dragon shadow greatsword slashed down. The 3 high-level divine lords were chopped into pieces on the spot, a bloody mist filling the air. 5 divine lords were sent flying. They were severely injured and had lost limbs. A gap appeared in the encirclement and Ji Tianxing was about to pass through. But the Wind Frost Emperor rushed over and waved his dark golden divine sword, shooting out hundreds of cold beams. Swish! 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 The blinding cold beams carried a sharp power that could pierce through everything and enveloped Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing didn't want to be passive, so he waved the Sword of Burial of Heaven and slashed out sword beams to block the Wind Frost Emperor's attack. Ping ping ping! After a series of muffled noises, the cold radiance and the sword radiance collapsed, and countless fragments of divine light splashed out. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianxing used his ultimate technique and attacked the Wind Frost Emperor with all his might. Daylight Sword. The Burial of Heaven sword released a world-destroying sword light. From the initial size of a millstone, it rapidly expanded to a radius of 100 miles, like a dazzling golden sun. The dazzling golden sword light was about to hit the Wind Frost Emperor and the 20 Sir Gods around him. At the critical moment, the more than 20 divine lords, the Imperial Army Governor, and the 18 Imperial Consecrators all stepped forward to block the attack. They joined hands to cast a technique, erupting with the most powerful power, blasting apart the golden sun and also protecting the Wind Frost Emperor. Of course, these Sir Gods also paid a heavy price. More than 10 people were severely injured by the sword light, and 6 high divine lords had their divine bodies destroyed. Just as Ji Tianxing was about to follow up with another attack, Yang, who was hiding in the dark, attacked again. A crack appeared in the sky, and there was a raging divine fire and an extremely violent blade aura silently poured down. Ji Tianxing could only give up the idea of attacking. He used all his strength to block and neutralize Yang's attack. Although he used his powerful divine power and exquisite divine powers to block Yang's attack, his energy was depleted. However, his strength was being consumed at an extremely fast rate, and his injuries were slowly worsening. He also couldn't find out where Yang was hiding. Soon he was surrounded by many Sir Gods and was drowned by divine powers. Just like that, Ji Tianxing fought with Yang, the Wind Frost Emperor and the others. As time passed, his energy continued to weaken and his injuries continued to worsen. His white robe was dyed golden by the divine blood. The Wind Frost Emperor and the High Divine Lords were also decreasing in number and the casualties were increasing rapidly. But the ones who suffered the most were the defenders of the Southern Yi Divine Kingdom. The shockwaves from the battle between the powerhouses covered a radius of 30,000 miles, razing the entire area to the ground. There were more than 100,000 defenders in this area, but now they were all killed. Most of the defenders were swept away by the destructive shockwaves. They were directly smashed into pieces and turned into ashes. Under such circumstances, only half of the 600,000 soldiers in the Yanling mountain range were left. Ji Tianxing saw this tragic scene and his face turned grave. His eyes flashed with worry. He had no choice but to speed up the momentum of his attack. He unleashed his strongest power and used his fiercest ultimate technique, Rising Dragon Slash. He roared and held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands. He slashed out a dazzling golden light that was 10,000 feet long. The sword light was like a sun in the sky, illuminating tens of thousands of miles. Kaboom! The giant sword slashed down and killed a dozen high divine lords. Then, the night sky was torn open and a 100-mile-long spatial crack appeared. The encirclement formed by the high divine lords was forcefully broken open. The faces of the Wind Frost Emperor and the others changed drastically, revealing a look of horror. Ji Tianxing took this opportunity to teleport 1,000 miles away and escape the encirclement. Swish! He was like a bolt of lightning that tore open the night sky and fled toward the south. The Wind Frost Emperor and more than 180 high divine lords immediately reacted. They turned south without hesitation and pursued with all their might. As for Yank, who was hiding in the dark, he was one step ahead of them and had already chased after Ji Tianxing. In a short 10 breaths of time, over 100 divine lord powerhouses had disappeared into the horizon in a grandiose fashion. The ruins in a radius of tens of thousands of miles soon quieted down. As the divine light that filled the sky disappeared, the area became dark and gloomy. However, the scene of devastation and the lingering smell of blood in the night sky still made the 200,000 soldiers who were lucky enough to survive fearful. Ji Tianxing fled toward the south, flashing in the night sky and teleporting desperately. In less than an hour he had fled 800,000 miles away from the Yanling mountain range. Only then did he slow down. After all, he had not reached the Divine King realm and could not teleport for long periods of time. Not only did it consume a lot of divine power, it also caused great damage to his body. At the same time, Yank caught up and revealed himself. Swish! He was 10 feet tall and looked like a small mountain. He appeared in front of Ji Tianxing and blocked Ji Tianxing's path. Kid, there is a path to heaven but you don't take it. There is no door to hell but you barge in. This time, without the help of those two bastards, let's see how you can escape. Yanke held the bronze halberd in his hand and stared at Ji Tianxing with a cold smile on his face. Ji Tianxing's white robe was stained with blood and he had used up 40% of his strength. It was difficult for him to use his full combat power. However, he was not afraid. He stared coldly at Yank and said, "I was right. You escaped into the Wind Frost Empire and controlled the Wind Frost Emperor. You borrowed the power of the Wind Frost Empire to take revenge. I can see that you do not have confidence and certainty. Tonight, it is not certain who will kill who." Chapter 3282. Yank was not afraid of Ji Tianxing, but he was definitely afraid and in awe. Ji Tianxing's strength and hundreds of divine abilities and consummate skills made him fearful. Ji Tianxing knew the secrets and divine abilities of the Yan family like the back of his hand, making him feel awe. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was alone and had suffered heavy injuries, he was still so confident. Yank could not help but guess, could it be that he had reinforcements? Or did he have a backup plan, a trump card? Thinking of this, Yank carefully observed the surroundings, using his divine sense to search a radius of 40,000 miles. Between the mountains, the earth, and the forest, there were no suspicious auras or experts, only some ignorant birds and beasts. Even those stronger divine beasts had sensed the arrival of danger and had long fled. And at this time, the Wind Frost Emperor and many high divine lords also rushed over one after another. Seeing this, Yank deliberately stalled for time. When most of the divine lord experts had arrived, under the command of the Wind Frost Emperor, they formed an encirclement. Only then did Yank say to Ji Tianxing with a cold smile, "As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. This king is a middle divine king. No matter where I go, there are countless empires who will follow and swear loyalty to this king. The Wind Frost Emperor is a wise person. Naturally, he will not refuse to cooperate with this king. After you are executed, the Wind Frost Emperor and these 100 over divine lords will receive this king's guidance and rewards. And you are alone and in a tight encirclement. I wonder where you get the courage to fight against this king? Originally, the 100 over high divine lords saw Yang's true appearance for the first time. Everyone was full of doubts and were still guessing Yang's identity. They could not understand why the Wind Frost Emperor would listen to this person's orders. Now that they heard Yang's words, everyone understood the reason, especially when they heard that as long as they killed Ji Tianxing, Yang would reward and guide them. Everyone's spirits were immediately shaken, their blood surging. They immediately dispelled their doubts, throwing away all suspicions and worries, and their hearts were filled with surprise and anticipation. Many high divine lords began to whisper to each other, their tones rather excited. Reward and guidance from a middle divine king? This is simply a huge surprise. Since it's a middle divine king, refining king low-grade king level divine artifacts and divine pills, it should be easy, right? We are working for this divine king. If he gives each of us a king level divine pill, we will be satisfied. Not only king level divine pills and divine weapons, he will also give us pointers. To be able to get the guidance of a middle divine king, we will have the hope and opportunity to break through to divine king realm. His Majesty, our Emperor's really such a once-in-a-blue, how can we miss? Many high divine lords were well aware that the Northern Heaven region's region master was also a divine king powerhouse. But they were above of divine lord of the heavens and basically, of the world. Take the Northern Heaven region ruler for example, he had not shown his face for nearly 10,000 years. Even if the Wind Frost Emperor knelt in front of the Northern Heaven region ruler, no matter how much he fawned and begged, he would not be able to receive guidance and rewards from the Northern Heaven region ruler. After all, the dual identities of Divine King and Northern Heaven region ruler allowed him to stand at the top of the gods, enough to look down on everything. But now, the Wind Frost Emperor had the generous and selfless Yank Divine King. As long as they killed Ji Tianxing, they would receive a generous reward. This was simply a great blessing, for the welfare of all the divine lords present. For a moment, more than 100 high divine lords forgot about their injuries and exhaustion. All of them were in high spirits, their confidence multiplied. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing frowned, secretly cursing Yang for being cunning. This cunning bastard is much smarter than his father. The Wind Frost Emperor is controlled by him, obeying his every word, but those divine lords do not know what is going on. However, he understood the thoughts of those divine lords. With just a few words, he was able to win over the hearts of those divine lords and increase their morale. Ji Tianxing knew that it was impossible to sow discord between Yang and those divine lords. The only thing he could do now was to fight a bloody battle, break through the encirclement, and escape the great Yan Empire as soon as possible. Anyway, the surrounding tens of thousands of miles were mountains and steep ridges, and there was no army of the great Yan Empire. He was not afraid of hurting innocent people, so he could give it a try. He would kill as many as he could, and if he could injure Yang again, it would be a great gain. As for killing Yang and the divine lords, he had thought about it before. But after careful consideration, there was no hope. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble and to prevent any unexpected changes, Yang did not waste any more time. He did not need the Wind Frost Emperor to convey his message. He waved his halberd, pointed at Ji Tianxing, and ordered the divine lords, "Generals, listen up. Besiege this person with all their might. They must kill him. If anyone can capture him alive, I am willing to take him as my disciple and promise to help him break through to the God King realm." Once he said that, the Wind Frost Emperor and more than 100 Sir Gods were stunned. The next moment, everyone was so excited that their blood was boiling, and their eyes turned red. There was no doubt that Yang's amazing reward had stimulated everyone's nerves. Even the Wind Frost Emperor's blood was boiling, and his breathing was rapid. He was so excited that his hands were shaking. There was no need for Yang to do any pre-battle mobilization. Everyone unleashed their strongest fighting spirit, used their trump cards, and charged at Ji Tianxing without any regard for their lives. Kill! Don't fight with me. I must capture that boy alive. Ha! I must get him too. Charge! Everyone together. The chance to change your destiny and rise to the top is here. The originally quiet heaven and earth was suddenly filled with earth-shattering shouts. More than 100 high divine lords attacked from all directions as if they had gone mad. Yang also descended from the sky, holding the bronze halberd with both hands. He charged at Ji Tianxing, releasing a divine aura that could suppress the heaven and earth. Suddenly, Ji Tianxing was surrounded and in a precarious situation. However, he was not afraid. He used his trump card with all his strength, the ultimate move that he had wanted to use for a long time. Heaven-destroying sword formation. Ji Tianxing shouted angrily. His left hand formed a seal and pointed diagonally at the ground. His right hand held the sword of burial of heaven and pointed at the sky. In an instant, the gloomy sky became resplendent. Tonight, the moon was bright and the stars were dotted with stars. At this moment, more than 20,000 huge stars appeared in the sky. The dazzling star fell like a meteor, rapidly enlarging in everyone's eyes. In just 2 short breaths, more than 20,000 shooting stars were above everyone's heads. Only then did the divine lords see clearly that those were not shooting stars. Instead, they were giant swords that were 3,000 feet long. Each giant sword was shining with divine light and unparalleled sharpness. Not only did they contain more than 100 types of nomological powers, but they also had sword intent that could destroy heaven and earth. Boom, boom, boom. Chapter 3283. Swish, swish, swish. Sharp, ear-piercing sounds rang out in the night sky. In the blink of an eye, more than 20,000 giant divine swords formed a massive sword array that spanned 5,000 miles. This area was sealed off by more than 10,000 giant swords, and space was also sealed. In addition, there were over 10,000 divine giant swords that were wantonly shuttling back and forth between the heaven and earth for 5,000 kilometers, forming a dense and terrifying sword net. More than 100 high-level divine lords were immediately killed by the huge swords that filled the sky. Miserable cries erupted from the field, one after another. Bam, bam, bam. Kacha. With a series of muffled sounds, the high-level divine lords, who were already injured, were dismembered by the sword light, and blood rained down. The divine lords came back to their senses. They had no time to marvel at the wonders of the sword array, and they suppressed their fear. They hurriedly used their divine abilities and secret techniques to block the sword array's attack. Swish, 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 swish. All sorts of divine light shields and defensive divine artifacts appeared in the crowd, glowing with rainbow light. The even more dazzling giant divine swords were like bolts of lightning streaking through the night sky, raining down on the crowd. Rumble! A series of muffled sounds rang out incessantly as a series of violent shockwaves surged wantonly within the sword formation. All the divine lords, including the Wind Frost Emperor, had grave expressions, their hearts filled with worry and anxiety. The heaven-destroying sword array released a terrifying divine might that suppressed them, making it difficult for them to move. Their divine power was blocked, and their fighting strength was greatly reduced. They could only block the sword array's attack, and it was very difficult for them to launch an effective counterattack. As a result, the pressure on Ji Tianxing was greatly reduced. He stood amidst the sword light and looked at the distant Yang. Seeing Yang condense a golden shield and tenaciously block the giant sword's attack, his lips curled into a cold smile. Yang, the divine lords of the Wind Frost Empire can't even take care of themselves. It's time for us to fight. Come, let this king see how much you've recovered from your injuries. As he spoke, Ji Tianxing swung the burial of heaven and charged forward as fast as lightning. Rising sword! Ji Tianxing seemed to be walking confidently, but his speed was extremely fast, leaving behind a series of afterimages. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and swung it casually, but it drew upon the divine power of heaven and earth and released sword energy that could destroy everything. Even the 20,000 giant swords of the heaven-destroying sword formation released an extremely sharp sword chi. Under his guidance and control, they all charged towards Yang. Swoosh, swish, swish, swish. Ji Tianxing had only slashed out once, but thousands of sword lights had appeared around Yang. The sword light was unparalleled in its sharpness. Cracks appeared in the space within a radius of 10 miles around Yang. Seeing this, Yang frowned deeply, and his eyes became even more solemn. That damnable fellow. It's only been 2 or 3 months, and not only has he recovered from his injuries, his strength has even improved. His sword chi could actually tear through space. He was already infinitely close to the Divine King realm. And the combat prowess he unleashed is already the standard of a low-level Divine King. These thoughts flashed across Yang's mind, and he became even more wary and cautious. His bronze armor had been shattered into pieces during the battle in the Green Jade Palace. Now, he could only wear a grayish-brown armor to fight with Ji Tianxing. This armor had a rough and ancient appearance, as if it was made of rocks. In terms of grade and defensive power, it was slightly weaker than the bronze armor, so he could only make do with it. However, Yang used his defensive mystique with all his might and pushed the power of the golden light shield to its maximum. Bang 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 bang. Thousands of sword lights and sword chi slashed the golden light shield one after another, and a series of muffled sounds rang out. The golden light shield trembled continuously, and golden light shards flew out. Soon, cracks appeared on it, and it collapsed. Then, the remaining sword lights and sword chi slashed at the grayish-brown armor. Yang's body trembled from the impact, and dozens of shallow white marks were left on his grayish-brown armor. Without waiting for the sword lights and sword chi to dissipate, Yang took the opportunity to counterattack. He waved his halberd and charged at Ji Tianxing. Earth-shattering blow. Yang roared loudly, and he gripped his halberd tightly with both hands. He used all his strength and concentrated on his most powerful attack. Wherever it passed, hundreds of giant divine swords were destroyed, and sword light shards filled the sky. 100-mile-long crack was torn open in space, revealing a pitch-black void. In just an instant, Yang broke through the obstruction of the sword net and charged at Ji Tianxing. Before the halberd reached him, Ji Tianxing was locked on by a terrifying killing intent from 1,000 feet away. He was suppressed by a violent divine power, and his body started to tremble. However, he was not worried. With a thought, he used the power of the heaven-destroying sword formation to unleash a mystique. Absolute shadows of 10 directions. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At that moment, Ji Tianxing suddenly split into 18 shadows and merged with the sword lights in the sky. This was one of the many mystiques that made him famous when he dominated the god world. It was a top king-level mystique. However, his strength was still low, and he could only use the power of the heaven-destroying sword formation to create 18 shadows and merge them with the heaven-destroying sword formation. If he was at his peak, he could create thousands of shadows at will and merge with the heavens and earth for millions of miles. Regardless of whether he split or merged, he could attack or defend. It was a super mystique that combined defense and assassination. Such a strange scene caused Yan Ku's heart to tremble as he revealed a look of horror. This, he instinctively wanted to cry out in surprise. However, the Wind Frost Emperor and more than 100 high-level divine lords were not far away. If he acted shocked, it would affect the morale of the crowd and damage his authority as a god king. Swoosh. The bronze halberd that was burning with golden divine flames naturally missed its target. Yan Ku rushed forward for 10,000 zhang and destroyed more than 30 giant divine swords before stopping. He held the halberd in front of him and looked around, searching for Ji Tianxing. However, within 5,000 miles of the sword formation, there was no sign of Ji Tianxing. Even his aura had disappeared. It was as if Ji Tianxing had disappeared into thin air apart from the sword formation. However, Yang knew that this was not the case. Ji Tianxing must have merged with the sword formation. Unless he broke the heaven-destroying sword formation, he would not be able to hurt Ji Tianxing. Damn it! Yang cursed and charged to the edge of the sword formation with his halberd. Since Ji Tianxing did not appear, he would attack the sword formation with all his strength. As long as he broke the sword formation, Ji Tianxing would have no choice but to appear. At that time, the Wind Frost Emperor and the other divine lords would be able to help him attack Ji Tianxing. Blue sky, illusory sun. Fierce wind, falling stars. Yang waved his halberd and used all his mystiques to attack the sword formation. Bam! Bam! Chapter 3284. Yang was indeed powerful. After just 7 moves, the sword formation was already on the verge of collapse. At least 100 divine swords were destroyed, and a gap appeared in the sword formation. Seeing this, Yang laughed contemptuously. Haha, you coward, what's the use of hiding in the sword formation? This king can break this kind of sword formation that can't even withstand a single blow. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd fell silent. Thousands of divine swords suddenly gathered silently in the sword formation behind him, forming 9 heaven-splitting swords that were tens of thousands of feet long. The 9 giant swords had accumulated a terrifying amount of power, and they attacked Yan Ku from different directions without making a sound. However, Yang was already prepared and constantly monitored the movements of the sword formation. He immediately turned around and waved his bronze halberd, sending out hundreds of divine spear shadows to attack the 9 heaven-splitting swords. Boom, boom, boom. There was a deafening explosion as the hundreds of divine spear shadows collapsed and exploded. 8 of the 9 heaven-splitting swords were also destroyed. Only 1 divine giant sword remained, and it slashed at Yan Ku. Bam! With a muffled sound, Yang was sent flying backward and crashed heavily into the light wall of the sword formation. When he steadied himself, he looked down and saw that there was a deep dent in the grayish-brown armor on his chest. The armor on his arms had been cut open and blood was gushing out. At this moment, the giant sword that was tens of thousands of feet long glowed with even brighter divine light and released an even more ferocious aura. Whoosh! The giant sword suddenly changed direction and attacked Yang from a different angle with the power of hundreds of divine Dao laws. It was only now that Yan Ku realized that the giant sword was actually Ji Tianxing's incarnation. He had merged with the Sword of Burial of Heaven and absorbed the power of the heaven-destroying sword formation to transform his body into a divine sword. No wonder the giant sword was so powerful. Good. Very good. I have indeed underestimated you. But do you think you can defeat me with this little ability of yours? Naive. Yang was so angry that he started to laugh. He shouted angrily and waved his halberd again to attack the giant sword. Boom! Both sides clashed with all their might, causing a loud explosion. Yang was knocked back. His finger bones were broken, and the bronze halberd in his hand was shaking violently. However, this kind of injury was nothing to him. He could recover in an instant. On the other hand, the enormous sword was blasted into pieces, and it sprayed out fragments of divine light that covered the sky. After the huge sword was shattered, Ji Tianxing's real body was revealed. He flew backward for 100 miles before regaining his balance. Cough, cough. He couldn't help but cough twice, his face pale. He raised his sleeve to wipe the blood from his mouth, then wielded the Sword of Burial of Heaven and manipulated the heaven-destroying sword formation to attack Yang. Soon he and Yang were entangled in a fierce battle again. And at this time, of the 180 high divine lords, only 150 remained. Under the leadership and command of Emperor Feng Shuang, many Sir Gods regained their composure and formed a battle formation. The number of casualties gradually decreased, and everyone steadied their footing. Emperor Feng Shuang led everyone to resist the attacks of the 10,000 swords, and gradually moved to the edge of the sword formation. 15 minutes later, they reached the edge of the sword formation. 100 high divine lords formed a battle formation to resist the attacks of the sword formation. As for Emperor Feng Shuang and the 50 Sir Gods, they attacked the sword formation with all their might, trying to tear open a gap and escape. Boom, 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 boom. All kinds of powerful divine abilities and ultimate skills fell on the light wall of the sword formation like raindrops, blasting the sword formation to the point where it was on the verge of collapse. One after another, the giant divine swords were shattered into pieces under the combined attacks of the crowd. The power of the sword formation gradually decreased, and cracks appeared on the formation. It was about to be torn open. On the other side, the battle between Ji Tianxing and Yan Ku was extremely intense, and the battle was extremely intense. Yang was a little anxious. To prevent any accidents from happening, he didn't hold back anymore. He wasn't afraid of being injured. He used all his strength to finish off Ji Tianxing as soon as possible. Under such circumstances, Ji Tianxing couldn't escape and could only contend with him. Even though he knew that Emperor Feng Shuang and the Sir Gods were about to break through the sword formation, he didn't have the strength to stop them. Time passed. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. Ji Tianxing and Yang still hadn't decided a winner and were still fighting fiercely. Ji Tianxing's injuries were getting worse, and his body was covered with wounds. Golden divine blood kept pouring out, dyeing his white robe and hair. Yang also suffered light injuries, and his injuries were getting worse, and his strength was quickly depleting. At the same time, the Feng Shuang Emperor and the 100 Overseer Gods worked together to break the heaven-destroying sword formation. Kacha! The dazzling light wall was torn open, and a 10-foot gap was torn open. Swish, swish, swish. Emperor Feng Shuang and the Sir Gods didn't hesitate to pass through the gap, and escaped from the sword formation. As soon as they left the sword formation and returned to the dark sky, everyone looked as if they had been relieved of a heavy burden. Everyone felt that the terrifying pressure had disappeared, and they felt relaxed, and their divine powers were working normally. After everyone left the sword formation, they quickly formed a battle formation under the command of Emperor Feng Shuang. They arranged themselves in a formation in the night sky and joined forces to release a torrent of divine light that could destroy the heavens and earth, blasting towards the heaven-destroying sword formation. After all, it was only a temporary gap in the sword formation, and it would be repaired soon. Only by completely destroying the sword formation could they eliminate the threat and help Yang kill Ji Tianxing. Boom, 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 boom. The overwhelming divine light torrent, like a flood, poured down on the sword formation that was 5,000 miles wide, and there was a loud explosion that shook the sky. The huge light barrier trembled violently. Layers of ripples spread out, and countless cracks appeared on it. As wave after wave of attacks descended, the sword formation shook more violently, and the cracks extended in all directions, and there was a loud cracking sound. In just a short time, the sword formation couldn't bear the burden, and it shattered and fell apart. Ka. After a series of crisp explosions, the sword array turned into fragments of divine light that filled the sky and dissipated between heaven and earth. Ji Tianxing and Yang's figures reappeared in the night sky, and they were still moving and fighting. Many Sir Gods were energized, and they shouted with murderous intent, "Kill! Surround him, we can't let him escape this time. He is already seriously injured, and killing him is as easy as flipping my hand." Soon, Emperor Feng Shuang and more than 100 Sir Gods spread out and formed a 1,000-mile circle in the night sky. Everyone worked together to cast their divine powers and attacked Ji Tianxing from all sides. Ji Tianxing was in an even more dangerous situation, and he might be defeated if he couldn't hold on. But at this moment, in the night sky 10,000 miles away in the north, a space crack suddenly appeared, and there was a dazzling white light. Swoosh! The white light illuminated the world, and 3 figures of different heights flew out from the space crack, and they were as fast as lightning. In just a few breaths, the 3 figures arrived near the battlefield, and they stopped. A sacred and majestic aura that enveloped the entire place spread out, sealing off the area within a radius of tens of thousands of miles. Emperor Feng Shuang and all the Sir Gods suddenly felt the pressure increase, and their hearts were filled with fear and respect. Sword breaking the 9 heavens, sword breaking the 9 heavens. Chapter 3285. With the arrival of the 3 mysterious experts, the Wind Frost Emperor and many Sir Gods stopped attacking. Even Ji Tianxing and Yang, who were fighting fiercely, stopped at the same time and turned to look at the 3 experts. When they saw the faces of the 3 powerhouses clearly, their expressions immediately changed. Yang frowned and his expression became extremely ugly. He gritted his teeth and cursed, "Damn bastard! Every time you appear at the critical moment, you ruin my plans." While he was angry, he also felt helpless, because he knew that he could not kill Ji Tianxing. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing's expression was a little surprised. He raised his eyebrows and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. This couple came at the right time. They even brought strong reinforcements. Without a doubt, among the three experts, there was a man and a woman. They were Chao Qingyu and Lan. On the other side, the Wind Frost Emperor stared at the three experts and carefully looked at the man in the golden robe. After being in a daze for a moment, he suddenly realized something. His expression changed drastically, and his eyes widened, revealing a deep sense of horror. Domain Lord? Domain Lord? Because of his nervousness and fear, the Wind Frost Emperor's voice was trembling. He only felt that the world was spinning. His eyes darkened and his legs were a little weak. He could not help but kneel down to salute. Because the tall and burly middle-aged man in the golden robe was the Tianbei Domain Lord, who had not shown up for 10,000 years. As early as 10,000 years ago, the Wind Frost Emperor was lucky enough to see the real face of the Tianbei Domain Lord, but only once. In the library of the Wind Frost Empire, there were portraits and statues of the Tianbei Domain Lord. Therefore, when the Wind Frost Emperor saw the Tianbei Domain Lord, he was stunned for a moment. After carefully observing for a while, he dared to confirm his identity. Hearing the Wind Frost Emperor's trembling voice, more than 100 Sir Gods were suddenly shocked. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Their faces were filled with panic and shock, and their legs began to tremble. At the same time, the Tianbei Domain Lord was expressionless. He looked at the Wind Frost Emperor majestically and said in a sonorous voice, "Very good. You still recognize this king, and you even know that Tianbei region is this king's territory. I thought that you had sided with this foreign race's god king and wanted to help him seize the position of region lord." The deep and vigorous voice contained a powerful soul-sucking power. The Feng Shuang Emperor and many divine emperors were terrified. Their faces were pale and they were sweating profusely. This subordinate pays his respects to the region lord. Domain Lord, please judge clearly. This subordinate is loyal and devoted to you, and I absolutely have no intention of betraying you. The Wind Frost Emperor could not withstand the pressure of the Northern Heaven region leader. He immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. The Tianbei Protectorate Lord was unmoved. His eyes turned even colder as he asked, "You followed the orders of the foreign race's supreme being and gathered many high-level divine lords to invade the great Yan Empire. You started a war between the two empires and destroyed the peace of the Tianbei Protectorate. Is this how loyal you are to me?" Subordinate. The Wind Frost Emperor was at a loss for words, not knowing how to explain. After all, this was an established fact. It had happened and could not be refuted. However, he was controlled by Yank and was loyal to Yank. It was even more impossible for him to push the blame to Yank. After a moment of silence, he calmed down and explained seriously, "Please believe me, Domain Lord. This subordinate did not want to start a war between the two empires. This subordinate led a large number of divine lords here just to capture Tianxing. As long as we can capture this person, this subordinate will immediately let all the divine lords return to the Wind Frost Empire. Moreover, this subordinate is willing to be captured and bear the anger of the Domain Lord. I will accept all punishment and sanctions." The Wind Frost Emperor's tone was firm, steady, and powerful, showing the domineering and responsibility of an emperor. More than 100 Sir Gods were suddenly in awe and they let out a sigh of relief. Since the Wind Frost Emperor wanted to take the blame alone, they could be exempted from punishment. However, no one knew. This was not the Wind Frost Emperor's intention. In fact, he refused in his heart. He wanted to tell the Northern Heaven Domain Lord that this matter had nothing to do with him. He was also controlled by someone and had no choice. However, Yank used his mind to manipulate him and forced him to say these words. The Northern Heaven Domain Lord showed a trace of surprise. He looked deeply at Yank and said, "Wind Frost Emperor, even if you have some responsibility and show an iron and unyielding appearance, it will not help. The consequences of this matter are extremely bad and the crime is serious. It is not something you can bear alone. What's more, Since this king is here, you can only accept the punishment. What qualifications do you have to talk about conditions? Like a muffled thunder, the sound waves echoed in the night sky, deafening. The northern heaven domain lord's iron and blood domineering, 10 times stronger than the wind frost emperor, made everyone's heart tremble. At this time, Chao Qingyu also took a step forward and stood side by side with the northern heaven domain lord. He looked down at the wind frost emperor, shook his head gently and said with a cold look, "Tianxing saved my life. I will not forgive anyone who dares to harm him." After that, he looked at Yank and sneered, "Yank, I did not expect that we would meet again so soon. You controlled the wind frost emperor and led many divine emperors to kill in the great Yan Empire. Didn't you want to take revenge on us? Now, the three of us are here. Bring it on." When Yank saw the northern heaven domain lord and Chao Qingyu appear, he knew that it was over. He had no hope of killing Ji Tianxing. While the northern heaven domain lord was questioning the wind frost emperor, he secretly used the divine ability secret skill of stealing a beam and looking for an opportunity to escape. However, Chao Qingyu noticed it and changed the topic to him in time to attract everyone's attention. On the other side, Ji Tianxing also guessed that Yank would escape. He quietly flew behind him and blocked his way. In this way, Yank was surrounded and could not advance or retreat. He quickly controlled the wind frost emperor and took the opportunity to create chaos and create an opportunity for him to escape. The wind frost emperor was very normal. Suddenly, he became emotional. His eyes were as red as fire and he roared hysterically. "Generals, listen to my order. The domain lord will not forgive us. He will kill us all. We can only break out with all our strength to win a chance of survival. Everyone, follow me and break out at all costs." While shouting, the wind frost emperor waved his dark gold sword and madly rushed toward the northern heaven domain lord and Chao Qingyu and launched an attack. The 100+ high divine lords all revealed expressions of incomparable shock and astonishment. All of them were stunned where they stood. No one could believe that the wind frost emperor had attacked the domain lord. He seemed to have lost his mind. He was simply tired of living. Most of the divine emperors did not dare to act rashly. Their hearts were in their throats and they were sweating for the wind frost emperor. Chapter 3286. Kill. Charge. The wind frost emperor and more than 30 monarchs shouted as they rushed towards the North Heaven region master. Of course, some of them were like moths flying into a flame. Everyone, including the Northern Heaven region leader, looked at them quietly. In everyone's eyes, they had been sentenced to death. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yen Ku immediately unleashed his strongest power and used the steel beam substitution technique. Swoosh. On the surface, he was still standing in the night sky, looking anxious and dignified, as if he did not know what to do. But in fact, it was just an illusion. His real body had already escaped into an alternate space and was about to run away. Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu had been watching Yank's every move. The two of them immediately sensed that something was wrong and acted decisively. They slashed open the dark night sky and tried to kill Yen Ku. At the same time, the Wind Frost Emperor and more than 30 divine emperors rushed to the governor. The governor did not use his divine weapon and did not even try to block them. He was expressionless and looked at the Wind Frost Emperor and the others sternly. Suddenly he shouted, "A group of evil beasts, kneel down." The thunderous roar suddenly exploded in the night sky and shook the earth for tens of thousands of miles. In the invisible sound wave, there was a divine power that could suppress everything and a terrifying power that shrouded the Wind Frost Emperor and the others. Suddenly, the Wind Frost Emperor and more than 30 divine emperors froze in place as if they had been struck by lightning. The divine abilities and consummate skills that everyone had used also collapsed into fragments that filled the sky. Their fighting spirit and killing intent also disappeared in an instant. This was the difference between a divine king and a divine emperor. More than 30 high divine lords were stunned by the Northern Heaven region master's cold shout. All of their attacks and fighting spirit collapsed. The faces of those high divine lords were ashen, their bodies trembling like sieves as they involuntarily retreated. The governor looked at the Wind Frost Emperor sternly and shouted, "Evil beast, kneel here and wait for me to punish you." After that, the Northern Heaven region leader did not look at him anymore and went after Yank. The Wind Frost Emperor looked as if he had lost his parents. He knelt down with a dejected expression. He did not dare to say anything, nor did he dare to act rashly. The High Divine Lords were the same. They all stood obediently behind the Wind Frost Emperor, their heads drooping. The North Heaven region master's power was too deep, and it had long been ingrained in everyone's hearts. Because of this, he was able to make the Wind Frost Emperor and the other Sir Gods obey him with just a few angry shouts. 50,000 li away. The dark night sky was illuminated by a dazzling divine light. Ji Tianxing and Xiao Qingyu unleashed their ultimate skills and slashed out dozens of space cracks in the night sky, covering an area of a few thousand miles. The space in this area shattered, bursting out with terrifying energy fluctuations, sweeping up a vast white space storm. Shwa! Yank, who was traveling through the alternate dimension and trying to escape, could only rush out of the spatial storm and appear in the night sky. After all, the space in this area was already distorted. If he insisted on going through this area, he would most likely get lost in the folded space or be injured by the chaotic space fault. Yen Ku, stop being so stubborn. Admit defeat and surrender. Yen Ku, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings tonight. Ji Tianxing and Xiao Qingyu both shouted coldly and used their divine powers to attack Yank from both sides. How could Yank give up struggling and resisting? He held the bronze halberd with both hands and used his ultimate skill with all his might. He waved the halberd and covered the sky with spear shadows to protect himself. Bang bang bang. The sky was filled with sword radiance and the radiance of divine spells. They shattered the spear shadows that enveloped Yen Ku and sent him flying. Yank held the halberd with both hands and blocked the fatal attack in front of him. Even though his injuries had worsened and blood was flowing out of his mouth and nose. However, he used the powerful impact to speed up and escape to the south, cutting through the night sky as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, he had run 5,000 miles away, putting more distance between himself and Ji Tianxing and Xiao Qingyu. His incomparable desire to survive made him unleash his most powerful potential and run as fast as he could. Ji Tianxing and Xiao Qingyu could not catch up with him in a short time. However, when Yank had run 10,000 miles away, the Tianbei protector caught up with him. Shwa! In the night sky in front of him, a beam of white light suddenly lit up, and a powerful spatial fluctuation burst out. In the white light, the Tianbei protector teleported and raised his fists to hit Yank. Sky-dominating punch! The Tianbei protector shouted angrily. His body was burning with divine flames and the 4 wings on his back were all open. Endless divine power poured out of his fists and condensed into 2 mountain-like fist radiances, which hit Yank. Bang! There was a muffled explosion that resounded through the sky and shook the earth. Without any suspense, Yank was sent flying back and rolled toward Ji Tianxing and Xiao Qingyu. While he was still rolling in the night sky, he let out a painful groan and blood spilled all over his body. After being hit by such a heavy blow, at least a dozen of his divine bones were broken, and his injuries were even more severe. Yen Ke had just neutralized the impact and hadn't even stabilized himself when Ji Tianxing and Xiao Qingyu joined forces to attack again. Heavenly Dragon Slash. Thousand Gods Imperial Worship. Ji Tianxing held the Sword of Burial of Heaven and slashed out a giant sword that was 10,000 feet long with all his might, releasing a divine power that could split the sky and earth. Xiao Qingyu formed a divine art with both hands and used a secret technique to release thousands of divine shadows, which attacked Yank fiercely. Yank could only suppress his injuries and block with his halberd. Bang 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 bang. There was another series of loud noises, and Yank was sent flying again, spitting out blood. The ruler of Tianbei Protectorate took another 5,000 miles and appeared next to him, slapping him fiercely. At the same time, Lan also caught up and joined the battle. Ji Tianxing, Xiao Qingyu, and the ruler of Tianbei Protectorate joined forces and surrounded Yank in 4 directions. The 4 of them attacked Yank with all their might, and Yank was sent flying in the sky with blood splattering everywhere. Under such circumstances, Yank could barely fight back, let alone run away. His injuries worsened rapidly, and his strength weakened rapidly. Soon, he was covered in wounds and his body was a bloody mess. After about 15 minutes, he was severely injured and unconscious. He was no longer able to fight back. In the end, the ruler of Tianbei Protectorate used a powerful divine power to knock Yank out completely. The result was self-evident. The ruler of Tianbei Protectorate captured Yank and used a sealing technique to seal Yank's divine power and godhead. In this way, Yank was no different from an ordinary person. He was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. The battle stopped, and the night sky was quiet again. The ruler of Tianbei Protectorate carried Yank and flew to Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu. They looked at Yank in his hand, and Chao Qingyu asked, "Brother Qin, what are you going to do with Yank?" Chapter 3287. How to deal with Yank was not a problem for the Tianbei Protectorate Lord. He said calmly, "This foreign race's godly king came from another continent and had a blood feud with you. He also wreaked havoc in the Tianbei region. If not for his schemes, the Wind Frost Empire and the Great Yan Empire would not have gone to war, and hundreds of thousands of people would not have been killed. Therefore, I had no choice but to kill him to quell the war between the two empires, to comfort the dead people, and to give them an explanation." Chao Qingyu nodded and did not say anything. Lan agreed and said solemnly, "Brother Qin, Yank is a middle-level godly king after all. He is powerful and has many tricks up his sleeve. If not for you, we would not have been able to capture him so easily. I also agree that we should kill him to prevent future troubles. Otherwise, he will definitely take revenge and wreak havoc in the entire Tianbei region." The Tianbei Protectorate Lord nodded and said calmly, "This foreign race's godly king came for you. Since you have no demands or plans, I will execute him in front of everyone. I will give the two empires an explanation and deter those restless emperors." After saying that, he turned to leave with Yank. From the beginning to the end, he had never asked for Ji Tianxing's opinion. After all, he was the honorable Protectorate Lord. Other than the Azura God Emperor who ruled the boundless heaven continent, he did not need to care about anyone else's opinion. However, Chao Qingyu and Lan had been good friends with him 20,000 years ago. That was why he treated them differently. Wait! Just as the Tianbei Protectorate Lord was about to leave, Ji Tianxing suddenly spoke. The Tianbei Protectorate Lord turned to look at him, raised his eyebrows, and asked, "Do you have any objections?" His expression was cold, and his tone was calm and proud. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Chao Qingyu quickly explained, "Brother Qin, this is young Master Tianxing that I told you about before. If not for his help, Lan and I would have died. Young Master Tianxing is young, but he is a genius with outstanding talent and outstanding qualifications. He played a huge role in both battles against Yank." Hearing this, the Northern Heaven Domain ruler's expression softened. The coldness and indifference in his eyes gradually disappeared. He looked at Ji Tianxing and nodded slightly. "Since you're also a participant, you can speak your mind." Ji Tianxing said straightforwardly, "I hope you can give Yank to me and let me deal with him." The Tianbei Protector, Chao Qingyu, and Lan were all stunned. The three of them had never thought that Ji Tianxing would actually make such a request. Their expressions were both shocked and astonished. Tianbei region leader frowned and asked, "Give it to you? With your strength and means, I'm afraid you can't deal with him, right? Also, what are you going to do with him?" Ji Tianxing shook his head and said indifferently, "Don't worry, Domain Lord. I naturally have a way to control Yank. I won't let him do any more evil. Also, I'll leave Tianbei region as soon as possible. You can rest assured." Hearing this, not only did the Tianbei Protector's expression become more serious, but Chao Qingyu and Lan were also more surprised. "Young Master Tianxing, you mean you won't kill Yank? Young Master Tianxing, why are you doing this? Yank can't be left alive." Since the two of them had spoken, the Tianbei Protector didn't need to say anything more. Ji Tianxing looked at Chao Qingyu and Lan and said, I won't kill Yank because he's more useful alive. Also, since I dared to do this, I have enough confidence and certainty that I can completely control Yank. Didn't you say before that you wanted to repay my kindness? How about this? Hand Yank over to me as a token of gratitude. In fact, Ji Tianxing really didn't want to kill Yank. In comparison, it was more useful to keep Yank alive to serve him. He had other ideas and plans, but it wasn't convenient for him to reveal them to Chao Qingyu and the others. His tone was firm and his attitude was resolute. In addition, Chao Qingyu and Lan had always been grateful to him and wanted to find an opportunity to repay him. Therefore, the couple looked at each other and accepted Ji Tianxing's request. The two of them looked at the Tianbei protector with questioning and pleading eyes. The Tianbei protector frowned and thought for a moment, then said, "You and your wife owe him a favor. Since he wants to use Yank to offset it, I can fulfill his wish. However, I must see with my own eyes that he can truly control Yank and leave Tianbei region." After that, he threw Yank in front of Ji Tianxing. The Tianbei protector didn't have any deep hatred for Yank, so he didn't have to kill him. He only did this to maintain the peace of Tianbei region. The three of them gathered their gazes on Ji Tianxing. Everyone wanted to see how Ji Tianxing could control Yank. After all, Yank was a real medium divine king. The so-called control wasn't as simple as sealing Yanke's power like what he was doing now. It was like how Yank controlled the Emperor of Wind and Frost, turning him into a puppet that obeyed all orders. Ji Tianxing didn't waste any time and didn't want to waste any more time talking nonsense. In front of the Tianbei protector, Chao Qingyu, and Lan, he began to use his divine power secret skill. He waved his hands with a solemn expression and formed a divine art, drawing out mysterious divine light and activating his lifetime's power. Sush, sush, sush. Mighty divine power, carrying the power of more than 100 divine Tao laws, gushed out from his fingertips. Thousands of strands of divine light interweaved and folded in front of him, shuttling back and forth and condensing into mysterious divine seals. One after another, exquisite divine seals were formed and stacked on top of each other. In the beginning, the Tianbei protector was still indifferent and had a scrutinizing attitude. After watching for a while, he saw the secret behind it and his pupils shrank, his expression becoming much more solemn. After watching Ji Tianxing for a quarter of an hour, his eyes became more focused and his expression became shocked and astonished. This was because Ji Tianxing's divine power used 300 divine Tao laws and condensed thousands of divine seals. Even the Tianbei protector had never seen such a miraculous technique. At the same time, he also saw that although Ji Tianxing wasn't a divine king, he had mastered 300 divine Tao laws. This was simply unheard of, an unbelievable miracle. Previously, Chao Qingyu and Lan had told him that Ji Tianxing was the most monstrous genius they had ever seen in their lives. Now that the Tianbei protector saw it with his own eyes, he deeply agreed. Unknowingly, 15 minutes passed. Millions of divine lights condensed into a golden sword in front of Ji Tianxing. The finger-sized golden sword light flashed with divine and dazzling light. Ji Tianxing activated the small golden sword and pierced Yank's forehead, into his godhead, and into his divine soul. The entire process was very smooth and didn't encounter any obstacles. The Tianbei protector, Chao Qingyu, and Lan watched the entire process with their divine senses and were immediately in awe and astonishment. Chapter 3288. Yank was in a coma, and his power and divine soul were sealed. The small golden sword that Ji Tianxing had conjured could, of course, pierce through his godhead. However, the structure of the walnut-sized godhead was extremely complicated. Even in a coma, the godhead would protect itself and form a strong defense. Unless Ji Tianxing could find the weakness and flaw of the godhead, he could only control the small golden sword and force it into the godhead. However, forcefully piercing Yank's godhead would cause him serious injuries. In the best-case scenario, his power would be greatly reduced, and in the worst-case scenario, his life would be in danger. In addition, the godheads of different races were different. Yank was a foreign race's supreme being, so his godhead was more complicated and his defense stronger. However, Ji Tianxing controlled the small golden sword and pierced the godhead with precision, smoothly merging it with his divine soul. Yang was not affected, and his divine soul's aura was still stable. This was enough to prove that Ji Tianxing had already found the weakness and flaw of Yang's godhead. In such a short time, he had easily done something that even the Tianbei protector, Chao Qingyu, and Lan could not do. How could the three supreme beings not be surprised? Especially the Tianbei protector, whose impression of Ji Tianxing had completely changed. The coldness and indifference from before had turned into excitement, disbelief, and admiration. Soon, Ji Tianxing finished his spell and stopped. He turned to look at the Tianbei protector and explained, "I have already planted the sword qi of obliteration in Yang's divine soul. His life is in my hands. Can you rest assured and leave him to me?" The Tianbei protector did not comment. He frowned and stared at Yang for a while. "Where is the sword qi of obliteration? Why didn't I find it in his divine soul?" Ji Tianxing revealed a trace of a smile and explained again, "The sword qi has long since dispersed and merged with his divine soul. It's difficult to separate them. If they can't fuse, the sword qi will hang in his divine soul. Sooner or later, he will find a way to expel the sword qi of destruction from his body." After he finished speaking, he formed a seal with his right hand and sent out 9 seals. Instantly, countless strands of golden sword qi quickly condensed into a small golden sword in Yang's divine soul. Friends, please prompt. Pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading. Once again, he used the divine seal and sent it into Yang's mind. The small golden sword quickly dissipated and merged with his divine soul. The Northern Heaven region governor saw the whole process clearly. While he was amazed, he finally dispelled his worries. "Well, since you can control Yang, take him away from the Northern Heaven region as soon as possible. You are indeed the most monstrous genius I have ever seen in my life." The Northern Heaven region ruler, who had always been arrogant and aloof, actually praised a young divine emperor to his face. This was the first time this had happened. Chao Qingyu and Lan knew his character well. They found it unbelievable and their eyes were full of splendor. The Northern Heaven region governor did not say anything more. His eyes fell on Chao Qingyu and Lan. He said, "When this is over, let's leave Yang to Tianxing. We should go back. That bastard Emperor Feng Shuang is still waiting for me to deal with him." However, Chao Qingyu and Lan shook their heads. "Brother Qin, you can deal with this matter. We won't interfere. Also, we have something to say to young Master Tianxing." The Northern Heaven region governor seemed to have guessed something. He took a deep look at the two of them and nodded slightly. "All right, then I'll leave first. You guys, take care." After that, the Northern Heaven region governor waved his hand and broke the night sky. He stepped into the space crack and disappeared. After he left, Ji Tianxing looked at Chao Qingyu and Lan and asked the question in his heart. "Tonight, I passed by the Yanling mountain range and saw a powerhouse slaughtering the Yinan divine nation's guards, so I decided to help." He didn't expect to meet the Wind Frost Emperor and Yang here. It was all Yang's doing. However, didn't you all leave the Cloud Sea secret realm to find someone to treat your injuries? Why you here? And with the Tianbei region master? Could it be that the person you're talking about is? Chao Qingyu nodded with a smile and explained, "That's right. We were talking about Brother Qin when we said that we were looking for someone to heal us. As early as 20,000 years ago, we were good friends. He is a god king. He is the only one who can help us heal our injuries quickly." Lan nodded in agreement and explained, "Yesterday evening, we were in the Domain Lord's divine palace and he used his arts to heal our injuries. Suddenly, the Emperor of the Great Yan Empire sent an emergency message to the Territorial Lord for help and briefly explained the situation." And NB friends, please prompt. Pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading. SP. The Tianbei region has been peaceful for nearly 10,000 years, and the Territorial Lord has never appeared. This time, The Windfrost Empire sent a large number of powerhouses to attack the Great Yan Empire and instigate a war between the two empires. Of course, the territorial lord was furious and decided to take action personally to stop the war from happening. We were also present at that time, so we naturally followed the territorial lord to help him quell the war. We didn't expect to see you and Yank fighting as soon as we arrived at the Yanling mountain range. What a coincidence! After listening to Lan Er's explanation, Ji Tianxing came to a realization. I see. No wonder the Tianbei region master, who hasn't shown his face for 10,000 years, suddenly appeared. You all followed him. I didn't expect that it was Yan Yongning who sent the message for help. In that case, I have to thank him. After understanding the whole story, Ji Tianxing looked at Chao Qingyu and Lan Er and asked, I see that your injuries are only about 90% healed and haven't fully recovered. I won't take up any more of your time. Let's part ways here. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, Chao Qingyu waved his hand and explained, Young Master Tianxing, please wait. Brother Qin has already performed a spell to heal us and gave us a divine pill. Our injuries are about 90% healed, and the remaining chronic diseases are not a big problem for the time being. Chao Qingyu's meaning was very clear. They had already troubled the Tianbei region master, so they couldn't go to his palace to continue recuperating. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, Where are you going if you don't meet up with the Tianbei region master? Lan Er pointed at him and said with a smile, Of course we're going to follow you and escort you away. Follow me? Escort me? Ji Tianxing was startled. He was rather surprised. Chao Qingyu nodded and said, Yes. Although you've used a spell to control Yank, he's still unconscious and hasn't woken up yet. Moreover, this guy has always been crafty and extremely difficult to deal with. We're all very worried. If Yank wakes up and gets rid of your control, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for you to deal with him alone. Lan Er also opened her mouth and said, Young Master Tianxing, didn't you say before that you want to leave the boundless heaven continent and see the outside world? From the Tianbei region to the southernmost part of the continent, the journey is long and there are many variables. The sea outside the boundless heaven continent is even more dangerous and unpredictable. It's difficult to move an inch. Qingyu has nearly 10,000 years of travel experience. I can definitely help you. Chapter 3289. Ji Tianxing did not expect Chao Qingyu and Lan Er to have such an idea. Although they said they were escorting him, they were actually following him. As for how long, they did not say. But it was definitely a very, very long time. In his mind, every godly king was an overlord. They were very proud and could not be inferior to others. Moreover, Chao Qingyu and Lan Er were husband and wife. Their relationship was so deep that it touched the heavens. They wanted to be a celestial couple and live in seclusion without being disturbed. Under such circumstances, it was even more impossible for them to follow him. But now, they took the initiative to mention this idea. Ji Tianxing could not help but frown and ask, Are you two serious? Chao Qingyu quickly nodded and said solemnly, Of course we are serious. We have thought about it for a long time. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought to himself, I just took control of Yan Ku and it hasn't even been 15 minutes. The two of you didn't even discuss it. How can this be considered deliberate? He vaguely guessed something and asked straightforwardly, Do you think that two tigers cannot live on one mountain? That Tianbei region can only have one godly king and one region lord? Now that both of you are godly kings and your whereabouts have been leaked, the experts of Tianbei region know about it. If you continue to stay in Tianbei region, it will affect the region lord's power and prestige. But he is your friend, and he even helped you treat your injuries. You don't want him to be estranged, so you decided to leave Tianbei region? Chao Qingyu was at a loss for words. He did not know how to explain. After hesitating for a while, he nodded and said, As expected, we can't hide anything from Master Tianxing. What you said is indeed part of the reason. But the most important reason is that we are indebted to you. We cannot watch you put yourself in danger. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, This is also part of the reason, but not the whole reason. You have other thoughts and plans, right? Chao Qingyu hesitated, not knowing how to answer. On the other hand, Lan was silent for a moment. Then she plucked up her courage and said straightforwardly, "Young Master Tianxing, you are an extremely intelligent person. We can't hide it from you, but we never thought of hiding it from you. Yes, we do have other ideas. After all the twists and turns and tribulations, we all deeply understood one thing. We must have enough strength and means to protect and take care of the most important people. Only then can we stay together and never be separated. If we were powerful enough 10,000 years ago, we would have been able to cure my illness. Then I wouldn't have to stay in the darkness and suffer for 10,000 years. Qingyu wouldn't have to leave me and travel across the ocean, risking her life to travel the world." Ji Tianxing felt the same way about this. If he had been strong enough in his previous life, he would not have been besieged and killed by the 5 god emperors. If he had been strong enough in the battle with the Heaven Punisher clan before ascending to the god realm, his son Ji Wuhan would not have been captured and disappeared without a trace. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "So, all the previous experiences made you want to become stronger and possess greater strength. You can't stay in the Tianbei region, and you don't know where to go. Therefore, you decided to escort me and accompany me to leave the boundless heaven continent to travel the world. 4 God King experts like you, no matter how much you cultivate in seclusion and how much cultivation resources you use, it will be very difficult for you to improve significantly. Only by traveling the world can you obtain opportunities and quickly increase your strength." Hearing his words, Chao Qingyu and Lan hurriedly nodded in agreement. Young Master Tianxing's wisdom is indeed admirable. Before breaking through to the God King realm, we always felt that as long as we became a God King, we would be able to stand at the peak of the gods and achieve all our wishes. But in reality, after we broke through to the God King realm, we witnessed a broader heaven and earth and the world. Only then did we increasingly realize our frailty. Although I'm a 3rd heaven realm God King, encountering any middle-level God King, I can only be suppressed. Although Lan is also a God King, she just broke through not long ago and hasn't even grasped a king-level divine ability. Any godly king could easily defeat her. Therefore, divine Dao cultivation has no end. God King realm is also not the end. Young Master Tianxing, the 2 of us husband and wife have long seen through that you're a peerless genius hard to come by in 10,000 years. Even though you try your best to hide it, we can all feel that you look at the 4 seas, have the world in your heart, and have aspirations and goals that ordinary people can't imagine. Furthermore, your knowledge, experience, and divine ability means all make us very impressed. Being able to travel together with you, interacting with each other and discussing divine Dao cultivation, it will only be beneficial to us." The husband and wife's thoughts were seen through by Ji Tianxing, so they simply stopped being coy and admitted it openly. Ji Tianxing was somewhat emotional as he looked at the both of them with a complicated expression and said, "Although the both of you are God Kings, but you're not the overlords of a region and you're also not greedy for power and wealth. Compared to the majority of God Kings, the both of you can still maintain a pure heart, and that's really commendable. Since the both of you are honest with me and are willing to follow me to the south, then I'll tell you." Saying until here, he intentionally paused for a moment to see Chao Qingyu and Lan Er's reaction. The husband and wife indeed held their breaths and concentrated as they looked at him without blinking, waiting for him to give an answer. Whether they agreed or not, it was up to Ji Tianxing's thoughts. After a moment, Ji Tianxing then revealed a smile and continued, "Your sincerity, I've seen it. Your suggestion I accept. Furthermore, the both of you will thank yourselves in the future for making the wisest choice." Although this sentence now sounded a little arrogant and overly confident. But who was he? The Kenshin who once stood at the peak of the divine Dao and awed the world. He was absolutely qualified to say this. Chao Qingyu and Lan were stunned for a moment, then immediately revealed a look of great joy as they hurriedly cupped their hands and bowed to thank him. Young Master Tianxing is indeed broad-minded. Many thanks to young Master for granting our wish. In the future, we will be the friends and companions most worthy of your trust. The scene in front of him looked a little absurd and puzzling. It was clearly 2 God King powerhouses who proposed to escort Ji Tianxing, to follow and protect him. The one who should be happy and joyful was him, and the one who should be bowing and thanking was also him. But the result was the complete opposite. He agreed to Chao Qingyu's request, but it made Chao Qingyu and Lan overjoyed as they heaved a sigh of relief as if relieved of a heavy burden. Those who did not know the inside story would definitely not believe this scene. Having recruited the two new god kings as companions, Ji Tianxing was also in a great mood. He picked up the unconscious Yank and said to Chao Qingyu and Lan, all right, this matter is settled. Before we leave, the both of you can go and say goodbye to the region master. After all, leaving the North Heaven region this time, who knows when we will return? Chapter 3290. Logically speaking, Chao Qingyu and his wife were friends with the Tianbei domain ruler. They were about to leave the Tianbei domain, so they naturally had to say goodbye to the domain ruler. However, Chao Qingyu shook his head and smiled. No need. Actually, we've already said goodbye. Ji Tianxing suddenly remembered that before the Tianbei domain ruler left, he took a deep look at Chao Qingyu and his wife and said, take care. Obviously, the Tianbei domain ruler had guessed their thoughts and expected them to leave. It was just that everyone knew and didn't point it out. Ji Tianxing nodded. That's good. Let's go. After speaking, he carried the unconscious Yank and flew across the night sky toward the south. Chao Qingyu and Lan looked at each other and hurriedly followed Ji Tianxing. They hurried on their way. Not long after, the long night ended. The sky was finally bright. A new day had arrived. Seeing the rising sun, Chao Qingyu and Lan were filled with relief and anticipation. After flying for a while, Ji Tianxing stopped and took out Shui Lin's divine ship. Swoosh! A fierce black divine ship appeared in the sky. Ji Tianxing looked at Chao Qingyu and Lan and said, let's hurry on the divine ship. At least we can rest and recuperate. It was true that he had been heavily injured after fighting with Yan Ku for such a long time. He didn't want to waste time healing. The best choice was to hurry on the divine ship and recuperate on the divine ship. Chao Qingyu raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, that's a good idea. I happen to have a divine ship. Its speed and defense are passable. Let me drive the divine ship. You can rest and recuperate. After speaking, Chao Qingyu opened his right hand and a dark green divine ship appeared in his palm. With a thought, the palm-sized divine battleship expanded rapidly, turning into a majestic battleship that was thousands of feet long. The divine ship's appearance was majestic and dignified. It was covered in a dark green divine light and emitted a powerful aura. Ji Tianxing knew at a glance that this was the king-level divine ship that Chao Qingyu had personally made. In terms of flying speed, defense, and power, it was far superior to Shui Lin's divine ship. Moreover, Chao Qingyu's divine ship was more exquisite and its internal structure must be more logical. In addition, he had set up many king-grade divine formations. Recuperating and healing in the divine warship would be much easier. Thus, he put away Shui Lin's divine ship and nodded in agreement to Chao Qingyu's suggestion. Chao Qingyu opened the cabin door of the divine vessel, and the three of them entered the divine vessel one after another. Just as Ji Tianxing had expected, the internal structure of the divine ship was even more precise and logical. Every room and secret room had a king-level divine formation. Being in the divine ship was like being in a paradise. The entire space was filled with rich divine power. Cultivating and recuperating in the divine ship was like staying in the green jade palace. In the middle of the divine ship was a spacious and bright hall. Standing in the middle of the hall, Chao Qingyu introduced to Ji Tianxing, Sir Tianxing, the rooms in front of the hall are storage rooms for cultivation resources and weapons. There are also cabins for controlling the divine ship. There are more than 20 secret rooms in the back of the hall. They are all used for cultivation and recuperation. In each room, there are small amounts of divine stones, elixirs, and other resources. You can choose any secret room and go into seclusion to recuperate. In addition, there is a secret room that I have made into a prison. There are many sealing divine formations in it. When you are recuperating, you can leave Yank in there to prevent any accidents. As he spoke, Chao Qingyu used his divine telekinesis to activate the formation. He controlled the divine ship to fly south. Whoosh! The divine ship was like a ray of green light. It streaked across the sky as fast as lightning and traveled thousands of miles in an instant. After Chao Qingyu introduced the divine ship, he wanted Ji Tianxing to recuperate. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "From now on, we will travel together. We are trustworthy companions. There are some things that I have to tell you first. Actually, I am not traveling alone. Long before I met you, I had many companions following me. My family has also been following me all this time. Let's take this opportunity to meet and get to know each other. It will be easier to work together in the future." Chao Qingyu and Lan were surprised. They quickly nodded and said, "That's great. It is only right that we greet each other and get to know each other." Ji Tianxing took out Shui Lin's divine ship and used his divine telekinesis to wake everyone up. Soon, Shui Lin, Blood Illusion God, Gold Left Emissary, Blood Dragon Right Emissary, Nye Feiyun, and the others appeared in the hall. Everyone had just finished cultivating. When they heard Ji Tianxing's call, they quickly showed themselves. In the end, they found themselves in an even more exquisite divine ship. In front of them, apart from Ji Tianxing, there was also a middle-aged couple with powerful and mysterious auras. Everyone was stunned for a moment, sizing up Chao Qingyu couple with curiosity. Ji Tianxing opened his mouth and introduced, "Everyone, these two are Divine King Azure Jade and Divine King Yulan. They're also my friends. From now on, everyone will travel together. We must unite, trust, and help each other. Of course, the two of them are Divine Kings. If you have any questions or difficulties in cultivation, you can also consult them." Hearing these few sentences, Shui Lin, Nye Feiyun, and the rest were stunned, revealing extremely shocked expressions. For a moment, the hall was silent. Everyone was stunned on the spot. Perilous waves surged in their hearts. My God! Divine King experts? And there are even two of them? Too unbelievable! Divine King experts that have always existed in legends, we actually saw them with our own eyes? This Divine King couple is actually young master's friends? They also want to follow by young master's side? Too horrifying. Even unparalleled Divine King experts want to follow young master Tianxing? I really wonder who on earth young master is? Everyone was exclaiming and shouting in their hearts, becoming more and more reverent and admiring of Ji Tianxing. Very soon, everyone stabilized their emotions and greeted Chao Qingyu couple enthusiastically. Chao Qingyu couple did not put on the airs of Divine King experts either. They did not appear arrogant in the slightest, returning everyone's greetings with a very amiable attitude. After a series of introductions and small talk, everyone was considered to have gotten to know each other. Following that, Ji Tianxing used Divine Sense voice transmission to wake up his family in the 9 Heavens 10 Absolute Pagoda. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, White Dragon, and Zhen Hong appeared one after another. Only Ji Tianxing did not wake Ji Wushuang up because she was at a critical juncture of cultivation. The four of them appeared in the hall. Ji Tianxing introduced them to each other, and everyone was considered to have gotten to know each other. After learning that Yun Yao and Ji Ku were Ji Tianxing's wives, that White Dragon was his disciple, and that Zhen Hong was his maidservant, Chao Qingyu couple's attitude changed a little. They were obviously much closer. Everyone saw this scene and became more and more shocked. They only felt that it was inconceivable. After all, Chao Qingyu couple took the initiative to express goodwill to Yun Yao and Ji Ku. It was a kind of fawning and getting closer to Ji Tianxing. Everyone could not help but wonder how mysterious and powerful Ji Tianxing was to make two divine kings take the initiative to curry favor with him. Sword piercing the 9 heavens, sword piercing the 9 heavens. Chapter 3291. Although Lin Shui, left emissary Jin, and the others admired Ji Tianxing greatly, they also knew that Ji Tianxing was a once-in-a-lifetime genius and that he had supernatural powers that were comparable to the godly kings. However, they did not expect that even godly kings like Chao Qingyu and Lan would have to swallow their pride and follow Ji Tianxing. This was simply unbelievable. They had followed Ji Tianxing for so long and were very familiar with Ji Tianxing. However, they suddenly realized that they could not see through Ji Tianxing at all. After exchanging some pleasantries, both parties went about their own business. Lan chose a secret room and went into seclusion to cultivate and heal her injuries. Chao Qingyu went to the cockpit of the divine warship and adjusted her breathing as she steered the divine warship. As for Lin Shui, Shui Huan, left emissary Jin, and the others, they each chose a secret room and continued to cultivate. Only Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Bai Long, and Zhen Hong were left in the main hall. Zhen Hong did not think that there was anything wrong with this. However, he looked at Ji Tianxing with even more admiration. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and Bai Long, on the other hand, had strange expressions on their faces. They all sent telepathic messages to Ji Tianxing. Tianxing, how did you subdue these two godly kings? Big brother Tianxing, these are two bona fide godly kings. Why would they lower themselves and choose to follow you? Could it be that they know your true identity? Master, did you expose your true identity? The three of them were Ji Tianxing's closest and most trusted people. They all knew Ji Tianxing's true identity. Therefore, when they saw Chao Qingyu and Lan following Ji Tianxing, their first reaction was that Chao Qingyu and Lan knew that Ji Tianxing was Kenshin's reincarnation. In response to their questions, Ji Tianxing used his divine sense to transmit his voice to them. Chao Qingyu and Lan story is a little complicated. I'll tell you more about it later. The reason why they trusted me was because I had saved their lives and helped them a lot. Also, Chao Qingyu once tested me and mentioned something that happened 1,000 years ago. I met him back then, fought him, and even gave him some pointers. He probably had some suspicions but could not be sure. Therefore, they were willing to escort me out of the boundless heaven continent. Hearing this, the three of them understood the reason. At the same time, they didn't need to ask how Chao Qingyu had tested him. They could guess that Ji Tianxing definitely didn't admit to it. After all, a divine king powerhouse over 1,000 years ago became a divine lord now. Who knew what kind of storm such a strange thing would cause? After a moment of silence, Yun Yao asked again. Tianxing, having two divine king powerhouses willing to follow you is naturally a good thing. In the future, when we travel the divine realm, we'll have an extra helping hand. At an appropriate time, you can also give them some pointers and guide them. But you can't trust them too much. Don't have the heart to harm others, but don't be without the heart to guard against others. Ji Ku also felt the same. Nodding repeatedly, he advised, Big brother Tianxing, you haven't been in contact with them for long. You might not really understand them. It's better to be on guard. Although White Dragon also had this idea, the two madams had already said it, so he did not elaborate. Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a slight smile, You all don't have to worry. I still have the ability to judge people. Moreover, even if they have disloyalty someday in the future and want to harm me, they won't succeed. I'm already at the peak of the Divine Lord realm. It won't be long before I break through to the Divine King realm. Also, other than the two of them, I have a mid-level Divine King with me. This mid-level Divine King is loyal to me. He will never betray me. After saying that, he took out the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Pagoda and took out the unconscious Yank from the 3rd floor. Yank, who was 10 feet tall, looked like a rock giant. He suddenly appeared in the hall, lying on the ground in a sleeping posture. He occupied half of the hall. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and White Dragon were stunned. They looked at Yank in surprise. Tianxing, who is this rock monster? Did you make him into a puppet? This big guy is a mid-level divine king? He's even stronger than the couple? Master, you're just a mid-level divine king. How did you subdue a mid-level divine king? Are you trying to defy the heavens? The three of them were shocked. They found it unbelievable. Ji Tianxing explained to them, It's a long story. I have to start with Chao Qingyu and his wife. Then he told them about Lan, turning into a monster, and how Chao Qingyu left the boundless heaven continent to search for the antidote. After half a quarter of an hour, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the other two finally understood the whole story. When they looked at Yank again, their expressions were a little complicated. There was also some sympathy and pity in their eyes. If that's the case, this Yank is really unlucky. The Wind Thunder Soul Cleansing Elixir that he worked so hard to get was stolen by Chao Qingyu. He chased after Chao Qingyu for many years and crossed the sea to Tianbei region. Unfortunately, he met you. Now, not only did he fail to get the elixir back, but he was also severely injured and had his divine soul controlled by you. Big Brother Tianxing, this guy is a mid-level divine king. You have to be careful. If he removes the apocalyptic sword qi that you planted in him in the future, he'll definitely take revenge on you. Master is still master. With the strength of a peak divine lord, you can actually control a mid-level divine king. You're more than 10 times more awesome than you were back then. After hearing what the three of them said, Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Don't worry. Since I can control Yank, I have absolute confidence that he won't be able to escape. From now on, he's my most loyal guard. Now, our forces can be considered very strong. With 3 divine kings protecting us, it's enough to roam the divine realm. Don't worry, go back to the divine pagoda and cultivate in peace. I still have to wake Yank up and let him treat his injuries as soon as possible." Indeed, the unconscious Yank was severely injured and his strength was also incomparably weak. Without decades of treatment and recuperation, it would be very difficult for him to recover. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and White Dragon didn't stay any longer. After bidding farewell to Ji Tianxing, they all entered the distorted space-time of the divine pagoda and went into seclusion to cultivate. With 3 divine kings protecting Ji Tianxing, they didn't have to worry about Ji Tianxing's safety. They could also cultivate in peace for a long time. Of course. Before returning to the divine pagoda, Yun Yao hesitated for a moment and said with a complicated tone, "Tianxing, after you recover to the divine king realm, if there's a suitable opportunity, I still want to go to the dragon realm and find Wuhan as soon as possible." Ji Tianxing knew that Yun Yao had always been very strong, even though she rarely mentioned Wuhan in these years. But Wuhan's whereabouts were still unknown. This was the biggest pain in her heart. Although she didn't say it, the guilt and longing in her heart had been tormenting her, causing her to often be secretly hurt. Now that Ji Tianxing was about to break through to the divine king realm, the plan to find Wuhan could finally be put on the agenda. Ji Tianxing understood Yun Yao's thoughts and hurriedly comforted her. "Yao Yao, I've been planning to do this for a long time. But we'll have to wait until we reach the reincarnation island to know whether it will work or not." Chapter 3292. Ji Tianxing only had a general direction for the future, but he didn't have a specific plan. He could only take one step at a time and make a decision based on the situation in the future. After Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the White Dragon returned to the divine pagoda for seclusion, he carried Yank into a secret chamber. This secret chamber was chosen by Chao Qingyu. It was the most luxurious and exquisite among the more than 20 secret chambers in the divine battleship. The secret chamber was very big, about 100 square meters in radius. There were many divine arrays and divine power was abundant. There were also countless divine elixirs and divine stones in the secret compartments of the walls. There were more than 1,000 king-level divine elixirs of various types. These were all made by Chao Qingyu when he was traveling in the divine realm. He wasn't too upset when the Green Jade Palace was destroyed because there weren't many treasures in it. All his belongings were in the infinite space ring and the divine battleship. Ji Tianxing stood in the secret chamber and threw Yank in the middle of the array. He waved his hand and sent a beam of divine white light into his body. Soon, Yank's divine power was replenished and he recovered some of his strength and spirit. He finally woke up from his deep sleep and slowly opened his eyes. The secret chamber was dimly lit. Yank looked around with blurred eyes and sat up with his arms supporting his body. As soon as he looked up, he saw Ji Tianxing not far in front of him looking at him calmly. He stood up instinctively and shouted with murderous intent, "Bastard! I'm going to kill you!" Yank cursed angrily. He ignored his injuries and was about to take out the bronze halberd to kill Ji Tianxing. However, he tried 3 times and the bronze halberd didn't respond. It didn't appear. How can this be? Where is my heaven-shaking halberd? Yank was puzzled. He frowned and looked around for the halberd. Ji Tianxing stretched out his right hand and a divine light flashed in his palm. The bronze halberd appeared. Are you looking for this? Yang was stunned for a moment. His eyes fell on the bronze halberd, and he snatched it without hesitation. Damn it, return the halberd to me. As he roared, Yang pounced over with a ferocious expression. Ji Tianxing stood where he was and shouted coldly with a dignified expression, Kneel. You're courting death. Yank was so angry that he cursed subconsciously. However, something strange happened. He really wanted to snatch the halberd and tear Ji Tianxing into pieces. However, his divine soul and body refused to listen to him. For some reason, he stopped walking, kneeled down on one knee, and lowered his head. They looked like the guards under Ji Tianxing's command, bowing to him and listening to his instructions and orders. Yank was dumbfounded. His eyes were wide open, revealing a look of horror. How could this be? My will can't control my divine body and divine power? He immediately reacted. He glared at Ji Tianxing and roared, Tianxing! You bastard, what did you do to me? Ji Tianxing held the bronze halberd and said with a smile, Yank, you're a smart man. You should understand your current situation. That's right. I used a little trick to control your divine soul. Although you don't look strange, you're not much different from a puppet. From now on, you're my most loyal servant and guard. Don't even think about resisting or running away. You should know that I only need to think about it, and no matter where you run, your godhead will explode and you will die. Although Ji Tianxing was smiling, in Yang's eyes, he was more terrifying than a demon. He was shocked and angry. He was so angry that he trembled and his back was covered in cold sweat. You damn bastard, you're just a divine emperor. How could you control me? Yang couldn't accept this fact. He hurriedly cast a spell to check the godhead. However, he checked the godhead inside and out 10 times and found nothing unusual. This made him even more shocked and desperate. He couldn't even find anything unusual. How could he get rid of Ji Tianxing's control? It was too desperate. Ji Tianxing frowned and was a little unhappy. He said in a dignified tone, Don't do things more than 3 times. You should call me Master or Supreme One. If you call me Supreme One again, I'll let you stab yourself 10 times. Yank was so humiliated that he went berserk. He was so angry that he almost lost his mind. He stared at Ji Tianxing with bloodshot eyes and roared hysterically, Bastard! You despicable and shameless bastard! I'm a noble medium divine king, the dignified Tianquan territory ruler. Even if I die, I will never surrender to you, let alone be your servant. Kill this king and give this king a quick death. Ji Tianxing looked at him expressionlessly. He threw the bronze halberd in front of him and said indifferently, You've challenged my bottom line again and again. You should be punished severely. You'll be punished 30 times. Take effect immediately. As soon as he said this, Yank laughed crazily and cursed with grief and indignation, You're so funny. How can I hurt myself? Before he finished speaking, his body loyally carried out the order. He picked up the bronze halberd and stabbed his chest and abdomen. Puff, one stab after another, steady and powerful, piercing into the bone. Blood splattered, and muffled sounds kept coming out. Yank was completely stunned. He even forgot about the pain and didn't even scream. After a while, the 30 stabs were finished. His chest and abdomen were badly mutilated and full of bloody holes, like a sieve. His injuries, which were already terrible, became even more terrifying. His god body was on the verge of collapsing. Blood kept coming out of Yank's mouth. He murmured in a daze, Is this still my divine body? I can't even control my own body with my own will? But why are you doing this to me? The heart-wrenching pain finally woke him up and forced him to face reality. Although he still had an independent and sober consciousness. He was indeed controlled by Ji Tianxing and became a puppet that obeyed his every command. Such a heavy blow was unprecedented for him. Not only did it humiliate him to the extreme, but the pride in his heart also collapsed. I didn't expect to be reduced to such a state. I'd rather die than be manipulated by you. Yank was desperate. He sneered with grief and indignation. He raised his hand and was about to smash his head and commit suicide on the spot. However, his divine body didn't listen to him at all. His hands were hanging by his side, and he didn't have any intention to raise them. Ji Tianxing said with an indifferent expression, "Don't be delusional. Now that you've fallen into my hands, your life is mine. Your life is no longer up to you. Even suicide is wishful thinking. You can only accept the arrangement of fate and serve me faithfully. Only then can you live and have the hope of regaining your freedom." Regaining my freedom? Yang was stunned for a moment. He frowned and sneered, "How can you remove the control and let me regain my freedom?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Of course not now. As for the future, it depends on your performance." Chapter 3293. Yang was silent. If he could live, he wouldn't want to die. Even if he had to live a humiliating life, at least there was hope for him to regain his freedom and escape from Ji Tianxing's control. He gradually calmed down, thinking and weighing the pros and cons in his heart. "I can't believe this bastard's words. He has already controlled me. How can he remove the control? For now, I can only obey and treat my injuries first. After I recover and regain my strength, I'll think of a way to remove the control. I might be able to escape." Thinking of this, Yang's eyes regained some color, and there was a glimmer of hope in his heart. He frowned and stared at Ji Tianxing gloomily. He said angrily, "I hope you keep your word." Without a doubt, Yang chose to compromise with Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, 10 breaths ago, you were still saying that you would never submit to this king even if you were to die, much less become this king's servant. Just a moment ago, he was unyielding and would rather die than submit. In the blink of an eye, he submitted to Ji Tianxing and decided to endure the humiliation and wait for an opportunity. It was like slapping himself in the face. However, Ji Tianxing had to say it out loud and repeat it in front of him. Yang was instantly humiliated and angry. His whole body trembled, and blood spurted out of his mouth and nose. You're too. After the lesson of stabbing himself 30 times, Yang had learned his lesson. Even if he was about to explode in anger and vomit blood from humiliation, he endured it and didn't curse. After all, his injuries were almost at their limit. If he stabbed himself 30 more times, his body would be completely destroyed. In order to live, I'll endure it. Ji Tianxing revealed a mocking smile when he saw that Chu Li was forcefully suppressing his anger. He continued, "Your attitude has changed so quickly. You're really good at enduring humiliation and bearing a heavy burden. Don't think I don't know that you're planning to endure the humiliation and secretly oppose me. Heal your injuries first, and find an opportunity to escape my control in the future. As long as you escape from this king's control, you will definitely take revenge 10 times, no, 100 times, and tear this king to shreds." These were Yang's true thoughts. When he heard Ji Tianxing say it, he quickly shook his head and denied it. Ji Tianxing restrained his smile and snorted coldly, "Humph! You're a middle divine king, the domain lord of Tianquan domain. How could you not have the courage to admit your true thoughts?" Yang was silent for a moment before he nodded. He gritted his teeth and said, "So what? You humiliated and tortured me like this. Don't tell me that I shouldn't do the same?" Ji Tianxing was immediately enraged. He sneered and said, "Good. You really do harbor evil intentions and intend to disobey Master. You deserve to die. Cut the crap and stab yourself another 30 times." As soon as he finished speaking, Yang clenched the bronze halberd with both hands and lifted it up obediently. He was about to stab himself again. Yang was completely speechless. He was so ashamed that he wanted to die. When he didn't admit it, Ji Tianxing said that he had no courage. When he admitted it, Ji Tianxing took the opportunity to punish him. "Do you want me to live or not? Was there any justice in this world?" In his extreme grief and indignation, Yan Ku could no longer bear this blow. His vision turned black and he fainted. Plop. With a muffled sound, Yang fell to the ground, and the bronze halberd also fell beside him. Ji Tianxing's expression returned to normal. He whispered to himself, "Boy, You still want to play tricks with me? If I don't make you obedient, I'll be sorry to your father." After that, he waved his hand and shot out a thick divine light, which wrapped Yang's body. The dark green divine light had a powerful healing effect. The bloody hole in Yang's chest and abdomen soon stopped bleeding and began to heal. Next, Ji Tianxing activated the divine array in the secret chamber and cast a spell to heal Yang's injuries. After all, he only wanted to teach Yang a lesson and make Yang realize the truth and dispel any unrealistic thoughts. If he really destroyed Yang's divine body, it would take a long time for it to recover. In the short term, Yang wouldn't be able to protect and serve him. Time passed quietly. After 5 whole days, Ji Tianxing stopped casting the spell. At this time, Yang's divine body had been mostly healed by the divine array. At least, his external injuries were basically healed and he didn't look as miserable as before. Yang woke up again. After waking up this time, his emotions were more stable and he was obviously calmer. "Tianxing, I admit defeat for falling into your hands. Although you're not as strong as Chao Qingyu, you're 10 times more terrifying than him." Yang stared at Ji Tianxing and said in a low and solemn voice, "I understand. My life is in your hands now. You've only spared my life because I'm still useful to you. Since that's the case, I won't make any more pointless struggles or resistance. Why do you know the secrets of my race and know our secret arts like the back of your hand? If you can tell me the reason, I'll be completely convinced and loyally assist you. You can release me only when you're satisfied with my performance. How about it?" Yang's anger and resentment dissipated and he calmly negotiated with Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was quite satisfied and nodded slightly. "Well, you're not too stupid. You've finally gotten to the point. I can promise you that as long as your performance is good enough, I can answer your questions. Not only that, depending on my mood in the future, I might even give you pointers and help you reach a higher level." Isn't the Yen clan bound by bloodline shackles and destined to be unable to break through to high-level God King? This isn't a problem for me at all. As long as I'm willing, I can help you become a high-level God King in the future. As the saying went, only by combining kindness and severity would it be effective. Previously, it was coercion. Now, he threw out temptation. How could Yang not be moved? He deeply felt that although Ji Tianxing wasn't a God King, he was stronger and knew more than a God King. With Ji Tianxing's knowledge and methods, he was indeed qualified to give him pointers. As for whether he could help him break through the bloodline shackles and become a high-level God King, Yang wouldn't comment for now. But he believed that since Ji Tianxing was so confident, there was great hope. With your talent and aptitude, you'll become a God King very soon. Sooner or later, you'll become a famous mid-level God King or even a high-level God King. I'll believe you this once," Yang said in a solemn tone. The negotiation ended. The agreement had been reached. Ji Tianxing revealed a satisfied smile and said, "Since that's the case, there's nothing more to say. Let's go. I'll bring you to a place to recuperate in peace." After saying that, he took out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and suspended it in the secret chamber. Then he brought Yang into the distorted space of the divine pagoda and flew to the bottom of the blood flame sacred tree. Only then did Yang realize that Ji Tianxing wasn't alone. He had family and friends with him. If it were anyone else, they might have evil intentions and find a chance to kidnap Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and Ji Wushuang in exchange for their freedom. But Yang knew that that was the stupidest thing to do. Ji Tianxing wouldn't be threatened at all. He could kill him with a thought. Chapter 3294. Time passed very quickly in the distorted spacetime. It was most suitable for cultivating in seclusion. Rock God King noticed this and was inwardly shocked. After all, even he did not have a divine artifact that could accelerate time. However, in Tianchuan Domain, his divine palace was located in a blessed land. It had the effect of 5 times faster time. However, compared to the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda, it was not worth mentioning. The blood flame sacred tree that was more than 100,000 feet tall released a powerful wave of divine power. Yang sat under the sacred tree and circulated his energy to heal himself. He kept absorbing the sacred tree's power. It was twice the result with half the effort. Moreover, he had plundered hundreds of billions of resources from the Wind-Frost Empire. It was enough for him to cultivate in seclusion for a few centuries. After settling down, he dispelled all distracting thoughts and focused on healing his injuries. Ji Tianxing also sat under the sacred tree not far from Yang and began to circulate his energy to heal himself. The distorted space-time returned to silence. Time passed quickly. Chao Qingyu piloted the warship and flew south at a moderate pace. For half a month, the warship did not stop. It crossed 5 empires, including the Wind-Frost Empire. On the morning of the 18th day, the warship crossed the border of the Celestial Demon Empire and flew into the Celestial Demon Empire. The Celestial Demon Empire was located in the southernmost part of the Tianbei region. Once they crossed this empire, they would be able to leave the Tianbei region. Unlike the empires of Great Yen and Windfrost, 80% of the Celestial Demon Empire's territory was high mountains and great lakes. The endless majestic mountain ranges and the lakes and deep ponds between the mountain ranges hid countless demon beasts and divine beasts. The gods of this empire were skilled in capturing, taming, and rearing demon beasts and divine beasts. They had mastered all sorts of beast-taming techniques. The Green Jade warship flew in the Celestial Demon Empire's territory. One could clearly see the figures of countless divine beasts between the mountains and the earth. Even in the sky, one could often see groups of divine beasts flying by. Only a small number of divine beasts were tamed. Most of the demon beasts and divine beasts were still wild and were very aggressive. Fortunately, the Green Jade warship was extremely fast. Its aura was powerful and holy. Most of the demon beasts and divine beasts were intimidated. They did not dare to approach. Even so, the Green Jade warship was attacked twice after flying for 2 days. The first time they were attacked, it was by a group of scorching sun divine eagles with explosive temperaments that were extremely aggressive. Over 30 scorching sun divine eagles, all had strength above 6th level celestial deity realm. The leader was even the divine lord realm Eagle King. They charged towards the Green Jade battleship without any regard for their own safety and launched a fierce siege. However, no matter how they attacked, the Green Jade warship remained unharmed. After several repeated attacks, they were all sent flying by the recoil and were seriously injured. Chao Qingyu activated the divine warship's divine formation when she saw them pestering her. Immediately, the divine ship shot out tens of thousands of sword lights, shredding the scorching sun god eagles to pieces. The second attack was from 3 gigantic, bloodthirsty sky-shaking wolves. They all had divine lord realm strength, overlords that ruled over millions of miles of mountain ranges. They were extremely savage and bloodthirsty. For a long time, they had relied on hunting other demonic beasts and divine beasts to devour their divine pills and flesh to increase their strength. Chao Qingyu showed no mercy to these extremely aggressive and ferocious demonic beasts. The warship released tens of thousands of divine light blades, sweeping over the 3 sky-shaking wolves like a storm. In the blink of an eye, the 3 sky-shaking wolves were shredded into pieces, their flesh and blood splattering everywhere. After these 2 attacks, the Green Jade warship did not encounter any more attacks. After all, they were in the outskirts of the Celestial Beast Empire, in the 2 kingdoms under its command. 2 days later, the Green Jade warship entered the central region of the Celestial Beast Empire and arrived within the empire's borders. At this moment, Lin Shui suddenly left the secret chamber and entered the cockpit of the divine warship. Lin Shui greets Divine King Green Jade. She walked into the cockpit and bowed to Chao Qingyu in greeting. Chao Qingyu, who was resting with his eyes closed, immediately opened his eyes and looked at her in confusion. "Miss Lin Shui, you don't have to be so courteous." Chao Qingyu nodded slightly and asked, "Why aren't you cultivating in the secret chamber, Miss Lin? What did you come to find this king for?" Even though Lin Shui was just a high-ranked divine lord, she was Ji Tianxing's friend after all. Chao Qingyu still maintained a courteous attitude, his attitude gentle without any hint of arrogance. Lin Shui did not beat around the bush either and went straight to the point, saying, "Divine King Green Jade, I want to ask you for a favor." Divine King Green Jade raised his brows and asked, Oh? What is it, Miss Lin? Feel free to say it. As long as this king can help, I definitely won't decline. Lin Shui clasped her hands and said, "Many thanks, Divine King Green Jade. Actually, it's not too big of a matter either. I just want you to stop the divine worship near Double Dragon City and wait for me for 3 days. After 3 days, if I don't return, you don't have to wait anymore either. Just steer the divine worship and leave." Hearing up to here, Divine King Green Jade was stunned for a moment and frowned. Why is Miss Lin like this? Do you have something important to do? Or did you encounter some trouble? Lin Shui shook her head and said with clasped hands, "Please forgive me, Divine King Green Jade. This is a little personal matter of mine. You don't have to worry." Divine King Green Jade also understood that he had only met Lin Shui once and had no friendship to speak of. If he got to the bottom of it, it would be unavoidably a little too deep and inappropriate. But he also felt that Lin Shui's eyes and emotions were very solemn and gloomy. Something major must have happened. Hence, he added another sentence and reminded, "Miss Lin, this king is naturally willing to help you. But you have to understand, this king is currently escorting young Master Tianxing and also has a duty on me. I can't make decisions without authorization. How about this? You wait for a moment. After this king consults with young Master Tianxing, I'll give you a reply." The moment she heard that he wanted to consult with Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui hurriedly waved her hand and urged, "Don't. Divine King Green Jade, make sure not to inform Tianxing. He was seriously injured previously and is currently at the critical juncture of recuperating. How can we disturb him? Besides, I'm just going to deal with a small matter. I only need 3 days." This Divine King Green Jade hesitated for a moment and did not give an answer. Seeing his hesitation, Lin Shui pleaded a few more times with a sincere tone. Unable to persuade her, Divine King Green Jade could not bear to see her pitiful appearance and nodded in agreement. "All right, then I'll agree to your request." Only then did Lin Shui heave a sigh of relief. After bowing to thank him, she turned and left the cockpit. Several hours later, the Green Jade battleship flew near an ancient city and stopped high in the clouds. Under Chao Qingyu's control, the battleship's cabin door opened. Lin Shui, who was wearing a scarlet dress, leaped out of the divine battleship barefooted and held a long and narrow demon saber. In the blink of an eye, her figure disappeared into the clouds and flew towards Twin Dragon City. Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3295. Double Dragon City was an ancient city with tens of thousands of years of history. The city covered an area of 400 square miles, and more than 5 million God Clan people lived in it. The city was surrounded by endless mountains and rivers, and the divine power of heaven and earth was very rich. Lin Shui, dressed in red, streaked across the sky as fast as lightning and flew to the sky above Double Dragon City. She stopped thousands of feet in the air, staying invisible, and looked down at the city below. It was early in the morning. The warm sunlight shone on the city, covering the entire city with a layer of golden light, making it look especially glorious. There were many palaces and buildings in the city, and all kinds of mansions and houses were arranged in rows, with crisscrossing streets and alleys. The city was very prosperous. There were many people in the city, and it was bustling with noise. Lin Shui looked at the city quietly with a serious and solemn expression, and deep sorrow appeared in her eyes. 1,200 years have passed, and Double Dragon City is still the same as before, but the people have changed. She muttered to herself. Her voice was low and sorrowful as well as a little emotional. Seeing the familiar Double Dragon City, which was still the same as before, endless memories flooded her mind. She remembered when she was a child. She was innocent and naive, living in seclusion with her parents and senior brother on Double Dragon Mountain not far away. Usually, her parents and senior brother were cultivating, and they taught her to cultivate in seclusion. But she was lively and playful, so she couldn't focus on cultivation. Her life in seclusion in the mountain was boring. At that time, she yearned for the prosperous Double Dragon City the most. Every few years, she could enter Double Dragon City with her parents to buy some cultivation resources and materials, and she could take the opportunity to play for 10 days to half a month. That was her happiest moment. However, a series of accidents came and destroyed her peaceful life. First, her mother died after being seriously injured to save them. Not many years later, senior martial brother Lin Shan harbored evil intentions and ambushed and assassinated his father, framing the blame on his enemy. At that time, Lin Shui was still in the dark, fooled by Lin Shan's brilliant acting. Lin Shan even wanted to marry her and swore to avenge his master. But Lin Shui still found out the truth and exposed Lin Shan's true colors. She attacked Lin Shan crazily, wanting to kill him to avenge her father. However, she was no match for Lin Shan and was heavily injured, almost losing her life. She could only hide and recuperate. 100 years later, when her injuries had healed and her strength had improved, she went to find Lin Shan for revenge. Only then did she realize that Lin Shan had already left the Celestial Demon Empire for the northernmost Yen Empire. Therefore, Lin Shui rushed to the great Yen Empire to seek revenge with endless anger and hatred. She had worked hard for 1,000 years. With the help of Shui Huan and Jin Zhuoshi, she had established the Blood Blade sect. However, she hadn't been able to destroy the Blood Sword sect or kill Lin Shan. In the end, it was fortunate that she met Ji Tianxing, who fulfilled her wish and successfully killed Lin Shan to avenge her father. Thinking of this, a touch of warmth flashed in Shui Lin's eyes. She was even more grateful to Ji Tianxing. She murmured to herself, "Father, mother, Shui has returned to see you. Although it was too late and I made you wait for 1,200 years before Shui killed that bastard Lin Shan. But in the end, Shui had killed the enemy with her own hands and avenged her father. Your souls in heaven can also rest in peace." After that, Lin Shui looked away from Double Dragon City and turned to fly east. About 100,000 miles to the east of Double Dragon City, there was a towering mountain range that was 30,000 feet tall. The mountain range was steep and filled with divine power. It was Double Dragon Mountain. At the same time, it was also where Lin Shui's parents lived in seclusion and where she grew up. After a short 45 minutes, Lin Shui flew above Double Dragon Mountain. Double Dragon Mountain spanned millions of miles from east to west. The mountain peak under her feet was the highest point of the entire mountain range. It was also the place with the most divine power in the dragon vein. More than half of the 33,000 feet tall mountain was shrouded in clouds. Lin Shui landed on the mountain peak. Looking at the green forest around her and the millstone stones scattered on the grass, she revealed a look of reminiscence. Back then, her parents had built the cave abode on this mountain peak. In the seemingly ordinary forest, the dozen or so millstone stones on the grass were the entrance to the cave abode. The cave abode was in an alternate dimension. It was a paradise. Only by mastering the opening method could one open the ceiling formation and enter the cave abode. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Lin Shui memorized the opening method of the formation and would never forget it. She formed a spell with both hands and sent out a series of formation seals into the sky above the grass. Soon, the sky above the grass lit up with 5-colored godly light. A light curtain appeared out of nowhere. The 18 dark brown millstone stones also lit up with godly light and emitted weak waves of divine power. Seeing that the 5-colored light curtain was very thin and weak, Shui Lin's mood was quite low. It's only been 1,000 years and the space boundary protecting the cave abode is about to collapse? A moment later, Lin Shui finished casting the spell and the 5-colored light curtain opened a door. With complicated feelings, she stepped into the light door. Whoosh! The next moment, she appeared in an alternate dimension with a radius of 10,000 miles. In her memory, this cave abode was her home, the warmest and safest place. The cave abode was beautiful with green grasslands, towering mountains, mirror-like lakes, and thousands of birds and godly beasts. However, at this moment, she looked around and saw that it was a desert under her feet. She could vaguely see some overgrown weeds and short withered trees in the distance. Further away, the towering mountain ranges had also collapsed, leaving only a few broken mounds of earth. The once verdant green mountains were gone. Instead, dozens of old trees grew sparsely on top of the ruined mounds. The mirror-like lake at the foot of the mountain was also buried by the collapsed rocks and no longer existed. Seeing this, Lin Shui's pupils shrank and her face became very gloomy. How could this be? My home was actually destroyed? Damn it. Who did this? Lin Shui was shocked and angry. She quickly flew to the sky above the mountain and observed carefully. At the same time, she released her divine sense to cover a radius of 10,000 miles to explore the entire cave abode. Then she found that not only had the mountain collapsed and the lake been filled, even the palace and mansion at the top of the mountain no longer existed. The entire cave abode was desolate and decayed. The grasslands and forests had become deserts. The thousands of birds and godly beasts that used to live here were also extinct. In the cave abode with a radius of 10,000 miles, there was not a single living thing. Deep shock and anger caused her face to turn gloomy, and her eyes surged with fierce killing intent. A moment later, she suddenly thought of something more important and her face changed dramatically. Oh no! Father and Mother's Tomb. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 3296. Sush. With a flash of divine light, Lin Shui teleported several times and flew to the deepest part of the cave. This place was originally a lonely peak that was thousands of feet high. Below the lonely peak was a primeval forest. The cliffs were covered with vines and moss, and greenish-brown rocks could be vaguely seen. At the top of the mountain was a flat ground with a radius of hundreds of feet. That was the platform that Lin Shui carved with a knife. She also spent a lot of god-level stones and gems to build a mausoleum on the platform. The mausoleum had a radius of 800 feet. It was round at the top and solemn at the bottom. The mausoleum contained the remains and belongings of her parents. In front of the mausoleum stood a tombstone that was hundreds of feet high. In Lin Shui's opinion, this cave was her and her parents' home. They had lived here for half their lives. Even if her parents had passed away, they should be buried here together and rest in peace forever. After she killed Lin Shan and took her revenge, she would come back to visit her parents' mausoleum and comfort her parents' souls in heaven. And now, her wish was finally fulfilled. As promised, she returned to her home and came to the mausoleum. However, when she saw the scene at the top of the mountain, she was petrified as if she had been struck by lightning. She saw that the mountain peak with a radius of hundreds of feet was no longer a flat rocky ground. It had become a ruin full of pits and cracks. The solemn black-brown mausoleum was also destroyed into pieces and collapsed into a pile of ruins. Not only were there countless bricks scattered around, but the hundreds of feet tall tombstone was also broken into dozens of pieces and scattered around. Lin Shui's parents' mausoleum was destroyed and turned into a mess. What was even more tragic was that the two golden coffins that contained the remains and relics in the mausoleum that had collapsed into ruins had actually shattered into pieces as well. Tens of thousands of golden fragments were scattered in the ruins. The regrets and belongings in the golden coffins had also disappeared without a trace or been burned to ashes. The impact of such a tragic scene on Shui Lin was unprecedented. Her mind was blank, her body was stiff, and her hands were trembling uncontrollably. After being stunned for a moment, she gradually came back to her senses. Unparalleled anger made her face pale. Her eyes were dark red like blood, and her entire body was surging with murderous intent. Ugh! Which goddamn bastard is it? How dare you destroy my parents' tombs? No matter who you are, as long as I find out who you are, I will definitely tear you to pieces and grind your bones to dust. Shui Lin was so angry that she almost lost her mind and screamed at the top of her lungs. Other than when her parents died, she had never been as angry and resentful as she was now. If the culprit who destroyed the mausoleum was in front of her, she would definitely kill him at all costs. Even if she couldn't defeat him, she would rather die together with him. After a long time, her emotions gradually calmed down, and only then did she regain her rationality. The blood-red flames of murderous intent also gradually retracted back into her body. Even so, her expression and emotions were calm. However, this did not mean that she was no longer angry. Instead, She suppressed her endless anger and killing intent deep in her heart. Her gaze was cold and sharp like a sword. She pursed her lips and remained silent. She stepped over the ruins and the rubble on the ground. She walked into the collapsed mausoleum and carefully searched for the remains of her parents. No matter how angry she was and how eager she was to track down the culprit. But what she needed to do now was to collect as many remains and belongings of her parents as possible so that they could rest in peace. Unfortunately, the golden coffin had been completely destroyed. After searching for an hour, she could only pick up a dozen or so fragments of relics and remains from the ruins. Holding them in her palms, she stared at the remains and murmured in a low and solemn tone, "Father, Mother, Shui-Er is unfilial and has not come back to pay respects to you in this 1,000 years. Shui-Er did not even know when the culprit entered this place, destroyed your mausoleum, and disturbed your rest. However, do not worry. No matter what, Shui-Er will find the culprit and cut him to pieces to comfort your souls in heaven." After saying these solemnly, she put the remains of her parents into an exquisite and strong treasure box. Then, she carefully observed the ruined mausoleum and searched for useful clues and traces. Through the traces left at the scene, she made a judgment and could confirm some clues. Then she used her ability and used Shen power to rebuild the mausoleum. 6 hours later, the collapsed ruins were restored to their original state. The tombstone that was 100 zhang tall had also reformed. She put the treasure box containing her parents' remains into the mausoleum and waved her hand to cast a spell to close the mausoleum. Standing in front of the mausoleum, she knelt before the tombstone and respectfully kowtowed 3 times before turning to leave. Then she began a carpet search of the cave, not letting go of any clues. She swore to find the culprit. However, after a short 4 hours, she had only collected a few scattered clues before she was interrupted. In the sky 1,000 miles away, a dazzling 5-colored divine light was flying as fast as lightning. Sensing the Shun power fluctuation approaching, Shui-Er hurriedly stopped her search and turned to look at the entrance of the cave. Seeing the divine light fly over, she immediately frowned. Holding the demon blade in her right hand, she began to accumulate Shun power. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the divine light flew close and stopped. After the divine light faded, 5 figures appeared. These were 5 heavenly demon gods. 4 of them were fire bear gods. They wore sturdy and heavy black armor and were dressed as guards. The leader was a skinny heavenly wolf god with a pair of wings on his back. This was a handsome young man with a soft and cold aura. He wore a luxurious brocade robe and a gorgeous divine crown. The young man's expression was also gloomy as he sized Shui-Er up warily. After observing for a while, he suddenly thought of something and immediately revealed a surprised expression. He asked tentatively, "Miss, why do I find you familiar? May I ask if are you Shui-Er Lin?" Originally, Shui-Er was also staring at the other party with a sharp gaze. She was fully alert and ready to attack at any time. After all, most of the gods who barged into her cave abode were enemies and not friends. However, she did not expect the young man to call out her name. After a moment of surprise, she frowned and asked, "Who are you? Why did you barge into my cave abode?" Seeing that Shui-Er had tacitly acknowledged his identity, the young man immediately heaved a sigh of relief and revealed a joyful expression. He was rather agitated and hurried toward Shui-Er. He said excitedly, "Are you really Shui-Er Lin? I was right. I really did not expect to finally see you again after more than 1,000 years. Shui-Er, where have you been for more than 1,000 years? Why have you never returned to Double Dragon City after you disappeared? Do you know how worried I have been for you for the past 1,000 years?" Hearing the young man's words, Shui-Er carefully sized him up again. Only then did her memory gradually awaken. She finally remembered his identity and immediately relaxed her guard. She asked, You are Mengyu? Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3297. 3,000 years ago, the previous city lord of Double Dragon City was called Mengqua. When Lin Wufa first came to Double Dragon City, he had met him. The two of them got to know each other after a fight, and they became friends. They went through trials and tribulations together and formed a deep friendship. The two families became friends and guarded the safety of Double Dragon City together. Mengque only had one son, the young city lord of Double Dragon City, Mengyu. In terms of age, he was born more than 300 years earlier than Lin Shui, and his strength was one level higher. However, they were of the same generation and had played together since childhood, so their relationship was very deep. Back then, in the eyes of the elders of the two families, Mengyu and Lin Shui were a perfect match. Especially the old city lord, Mengque, who treated Lin Shui as his future daughter-in-law and doted on her. Mengyu also cared for her a lot and doted on her. He liked to run to the Lin family cave and find excuses to see Lin Shui every 2 to 3 days. However, Lin Shan and Lin Shui were senior brother and sister, so they were close. They could be said to be childhood sweethearts. In addition, Lin Shan had publicly said many times that he had no regrets about being infatuated with Lin Shui. Lin Wufa and his wife also thought highly of him and could not stop them. As a result, Mengyu could only hide his feelings for Lin Shui deep in his heart. After Lin Shui's mother passed away, Lin Shui was very sad. She seemed to have grown up overnight and was no longer willful and playful. She began to cultivate and improve her strength. She often went into seclusion for hundreds of years. Mengyu could not see her for a long time, so he rarely came to the Lin family cave. In the end, the Lin family encountered a big change. Lin Shan killed Lin Wufa and wanted to deceive Lin Shui to steal the dragon sword and phoenix blade techniques. Fortunately, Lin Shui saw through his scheme and fought with him to avenge her father. In the end, they both left the Celestial Beast Empire and went to the Great Yan Empire in the north. The Lin family cave was abandoned, and only the graves of Lin Wufa and his wife stood alone on the mountain peak. Seeing that Lin Shui recognized him, Mengyu was even happier. He nodded excitedly. "Shui, I'm Mengyu. I'm your brother Yu." As he spoke, he walked toward Lin Shui and opened his arms to hug her. "Sister Shui, where have you been in the past 1,000 years? Do you know how hard it was for me to find you? You must have suffered a lot in the outside world, right? Why didn't you contact me? Do you know how worried I was about you?" Mengyu revealed his true feelings and did not hide his love for Shui Lin at all. However, Lin Shui quietly retreated half a step and avoided his embrace without leaving a trace. She bowed and said, "Big brother Mengyu, thank you for your concern and concern. Thank you. All these years, I've been wandering the outside world, searching for the whereabouts of that bastard Lin Shan, trying to kill him and avenge my father." After 1,000 years, Lin Shui and Mengyu no longer had the deep friendship they had in the past. They had become a lot more distant. But after all, they were good friends who grew up together, so Shui Lin couldn't be too cold. Facing Mengyu's enthusiasm, she could only respond politely and gracefully. Of course, Mengyu was not stupid. He could tell that Shui Lin was trying to distance herself from him. Since Shui Lin wanted to keep a distance, he didn't want to stick close to her. He kept 3 steps away from her and greeted her with concern. "Little sister Shui, when I learned that the person who killed your father was Lin Shan, I was also very shocked and angry. I couldn't believe that Lin Shan, that bastard, would commit such a heinous act of killing his father. Uncle Lin Shan's kindness was as heavy as the sea. Unfortunately, when I woke up and wanted to help you deal with Lin Shan, you had already left Double Dragon City. That's right, little sister Shui. Have you avenged your father? After 1,000 years, you must have killed that bastard Lin Shan before coming back to pay your respects to Uncle and Auntie Lin, right?" Mengyu rambled on for a long time. After he finished, Lin Shui just nodded and made a sound of agreement. The two fell into silence. Lin Shui thought for a moment and then asked, "Big brother Mengyu, are you and Uncle Meng well?" Mengyu was startled, and a trace of undetectable hatred flashed through his eyes. He revealed a sorrowful expression and said in a low voice, "My father, he was killed by a traitor 1,000 years ago and died in a foreign land. Even though I searched everywhere and did everything possible to investigate, I couldn't find the real culprit. I don't even know where my father's bones and remains are." Speaking of the sad part, Meng Yu's voice was somewhat choked with sobs. Lin Shui was stunned for a moment and was rather surprised. She asked in disbelief, "Uncle Meng actually passed away? How could this be? Uncle Meng had always been kind and benevolent. He didn't compete with others and had a wide circle of friends. How could he be killed by a traitor?" Meng Yu nodded in agreement and said, "That's right. My father was so honest and kind. He would rather suffer losses than mistreat his friends. Who would have thought that the heavens didn't open their eyes and actually let him end up like this? If time could turn back, I definitely wouldn't let my father walk on the wrong path. I would definitely remind him to know how to judge people." When he said these words, Meng Yu's tone was low and deep, and his eyes contained a thick hatred. Lin Shui felt that his words were strange and couldn't help but frown and ask, "Big brother Meng Yu, you mean there's more to Uncle Meng's death?" Meng Yu nodded and glossed over this question, no longer going into detail. Lin Shui didn't delve into it either. After comforting him with a few words, she asked the question in her heart. "Big brother Meng Yu, after Uncle Meng passed away, you inherited the position of Double Dragon City's city lord, right?" Meng Yu nodded. Lin Shui asked again, "Then do you know who entered this abode in these 1,000 years?" Meng Yu thought carefully for a moment and shook his head and said, "I didn't pay attention to this. I also don't know who came here. It's just that not long after you all left, I came in once. Seeing that you all left, I left. The second time I came here is today." Lin Shui frowned slightly, faintly feeling that Meng Yu's words were somewhat contradictory. She thought to herself, Meng Yu is Double Dragon City's city lord. This area is his territory. If a powerful divine lord powerhouse came, he would most likely know. Moreover, he kept repeating how much he cared about me. How could he overlook this abode? Even if he didn't have time, he could also send guards to stand guard here, or secretly monitor. If she was a meticulous person, she would hide these thoughts in her heart and secretly keep an eye on things. However, Lin Shui was never a shrewd person. She stared at Meng Yu calmly and asked, "Big brother Meng Yu, you haven't come to this abode in these 1,000 years. Why did you follow me here just a few hours after I returned to Double Dragon City? Don't tell me that this is just a coincidence." Meng Yu was startled and said with an aggrieved face, "Little sister Shui, oh, what do you mean? Ever since you left, I've been sending people to stand guard at Double Dragon Mountain, waiting for your return. Just now, the guards here reported to me, so I hurried over to check the situation." Chapter 3298. Hearing Meng Yu's explanation, Lin Shui still frowned. "Big brother Meng Yu, since you've been guarding this place for 1,000 years, why didn't you send someone to guard this place? Then why didn't you know when someone broke into this cave?" Meng Yu was at a loss for words and asked tentatively, "Little sister Shui, how did you know someone broke into this cave? What happened? Did someone disturb Uncle Lin and Uncle Lin's rest?" Lin Shui nodded with a gloomy face and said in a resentful tone, "I don't know which bastard broke into this cave and destroyed my parents' tombs." Her tone was cold and full of hatred and killing intent. The corners of Meng Yu's eyes twitched and the fingers of his hands hidden in his sleeves trembled a few times. His face was full of indignation and he shouted with righteous indignation, "Preposterous! How can there be such a person? Doing such a cruel and vicious thing? No matter what hatred there is, the dead are already dead. You shouldn't take your anger out on the tombs of the dead." Lin Shui said expressionlessly, "As long as I find the culprit, no matter who it is, I will tear them to pieces and burn their bones to ashes." Meng Yu nodded quickly and said in deep agreement, "We must make those beasts pay a heavy price." Next, Meng Yu comforted Lin Shui with a few more words. When Lin Shui calmed down, he invited her, "Little sister Shui, now that the courtyard and residence in this cave have been destroyed, you shouldn't stay here. You shouldn't stay here either, so as to avoid being reminded of the past and adding to your sorrow. How about this? You come with me to Double Dragon City and stay in the City Lord's mansion for the time being. We haven't seen each other for 1,000 years. I have to hold a banquet to welcome you back. Also, I have a lot of things to say to you." Lin Shui thought about Meng Yu's invitation and shook her head to refuse. Big brother Meng Yu, thank you for your kindness, but I appreciate it. My parents' tombs were destroyed. I must get to the bottom of this matter and find the culprit as soon as possible. I don't want to waste time before I find out the truth. Meng Yu wasn't surprised by her refusal. He frowned and thought for a moment, then settled for the next best thing. Little sister Shui, if you think the city lord's mansion is too crowded and noisy, then it's fine if you don't want to go. But it wasn't easy for you to return to Double Dragon City. You can't leave immediately. You must have a place to stay. How about this? I have a beautiful and quiet courtyard on the Luofeng Mountain, which is 30,000 miles away from here. Usually, there were only some guards and maids there, and no one else lived there. It's very quiet there, and no one will disturb you. Furthermore, that villa isn't far from this cave residence and Twin Dragon City. Shui Lin instinctively wanted to refuse. She didn't know why, but when she saw Meng Yu again and saw him fawning over her, she didn't feel happy or excited. She was even a little resistant, instinctively wanting to reject and distance herself from him. Perhaps it was because an even more imposing, mysterious, and graceful figure had been buried deep within her heart. Compared to that figure, all the young geniuses in the world paled in comparison. However, Meng Yu saw that she was silent and seemed inclined to refuse, so he added, Little sister Shui, don't you want to investigate the destruction of Uncle Lin's tomb? Don't you want to find the culprit as soon as possible and cut him into pieces? You've just returned and are unfamiliar with Double Dragon City and the entire empire. Plus, you're alone without any helpers. How can you investigate the truth and find the culprit? You can stay in the courtyard on the Luofeng Mountain, and I'll do my best to help you collect clues and investigate the truth. Also, I'll transfer a large number of experts and guards for you to order. Hearing these words, Shui Lin hesitated. Originally, she had helpers. Shui Huan, Gold Left Emissary, and Blood Dragon Right Emissary were all loyal to her. However, she had quietly left the divine worship alone without alerting them. It was indeed very inconvenient to investigate the clues and find the culprit. After thinking for a moment, Shui Lin nodded and agreed. All right, since Big Brother Meng Yu is so kind to help, it would be impolite for me to refuse. This matter is of utmost importance to me. I hope Big Brother Meng Yu can help me. As she spoke, Shui Lin cupped her fists and bowed solemnly to Meng Yu. Meng Yu smiled and hurriedly reached out to hold her arm, helping her up. Little sister Shui, please get up quickly. I can't accept such a big bow. You and I grew up together and have been close since childhood. It's my duty to help you. How can you treat me like an outsider? Shui Lin only squeezed out a smile and didn't say anything. Meng Yu didn't waste any more words and left with Shui Lin. Let's go. I'll take you to the courtyard on the Luofeng Mountain and settle you down first. Then, Meng Yu took Shui Lin and left the Lin residence under the escort of 4 guards. The group flew across the sky at lightning speed and arrived at the Luofeng Mountain 30,000 miles away. There was indeed a simple and dignified courtyard on the peak of the mountain. It was called the Perching Phoenix Courtyard. The courtyard was exquisitely built and was protected by many monarch-level divine formations. It looked very majestic. Just as Meng Yu had said, this courtyard was extremely quiet, and its divine energy was rather abundant. Usually, there were only 20 guards and 6 maids here. No one else lived here. After the group entered the Perching Phoenix Courtyard, many guards and maids rushed over and bowed to Meng Yu. Meng Yu said with a dignified face, Miss Shui is my best friend. From today onwards, she will live here. You must serve Miss Shui, like how you serve me. You must not neglect her. Otherwise, I will punish you severely and will not tolerate it. The 20 guards and 6 maids all said yes in unison. Their attitudes were extremely respectful. Then, Meng Yu said to Shui Lin, Little sister Shui, you can live in the main courtyard. If you need anything, just let them know. If you need anything, you can send me a message or tell the servants. He warned Shui Lin, then turned and left with the 4 guards. Shui Lin said thank you twice and watched him leave. Then, under the guidance of the maids, she went to the main courtyard to rest. At this time, Meng Yu walked out of the gate of the courtyard with the guards. He turned his head and looked at the gate of the courtyard. A meaningful smile appeared on his face and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The guard following behind him cast an inquiring look at him and transmitted his voice to ask, "City Lord, shall I return to the city now to gather people and immediately surround the perching phoenix courtyard?" Meng Yu waved his hand and said with a smile, "Don't be so impatient. You will alert the enemy. She has just suffered a heavy blow and her mind is not stable. Her whole mind is on revenge. She will not think too much. I will go back to the city now and personally send a message to the Imperial Advisor to report the situation. When the Imperial Advisor comes here, I will have done a great service." Chapter 3299. Late at night. Double Dragon City, the City Lord's residence. The City Lord's study was still lit. Meng Yu sat in front of a desk made of divine jade, with a colorful pagoda in front of him. A transparent crystal was embedded at the top of the pagoda, shining with a dazzling white light that formed a light screen in the air. A clear image appeared on the light screen, showing a secret room surrounded by divine light. An old man from the god race, wearing a purple divine robe and a divine crown, was sitting in the middle of the room, meditating. He was thin, his face dry and yellow, his sunken eyes flashing with a sinister light, and a goatee under his gray lips. It was this emaciated old man with an unkind face and a sinister aura that had the strength of a peak divine lord. Moreover, Meng Yu's attitude towards this old man was very respectful. After bowing, Meng Yu reported, "Imperial Tutor, this subordinate has an extremely important matter to report, which is why I dared to disturb you." Without a doubt, this goateed old man was the Imperial Tutor of the Celestial Beast Empire. In the entire Celestial Beast Empire, his strength and status were second only to the Emperor. The Imperial Tutor nodded slightly and said expressionlessly, "What's so urgent?" Meng Yu smiled and explained, "Imperial Tutor, for nearly 1,000 years, this subordinate has kept your orders in mind and sent people to monitor the Lin family's residence. Today, this subordinate's 1,000 years of guarding finally paid off. Lin Wufa's daughter, Lin Shui, has returned to Double Dragon City and entered the Lin family's residence." Suddenly hearing this news, the Imperial Tutor was stunned for a moment. His eyes lit up and his face was full of surprise. Is this true? After 1,000 years, that bastard's daughter has returned? Obviously, the Imperial Tutor was excited and expectant when he heard this news. Seeing his reaction, Meng Yu was even more excited and quickly nodded. This is absolutely true. After the guards monitoring the Lin family's residence reported the news to this subordinate immediately rushed to the Lin family's residence and saw Lin Shui with my own eyes. At that time, she saw Lin Wufa's grave being destroyed with her own eyes. She was in so much pain and anger that she wanted to die. This subordinate took the opportunity to comfort her and let her stay. Now, this subordinate has comforted her in Fallen Phoenix Mountain's perching Phoenix Court. She didn't notice anything unusual and was still focused on finding out the truth and avenging her parents. At this point, Meng Yu revealed a mocking cold smile. The Imperial Tutor's mouth twitched as well as a look of disdain flashed across his eyes. Lin Wufa, that bastard, is a sinner. Even if I destroy his grave and grind his bones to dust, it will still not be enough to appease the hatred in my heart. Her daughter is so slow-witted. If not for the fact that she has the bloodline of the Rakshasa race, why would I go through so much trouble? Finished speaking, he stared at Meng Yu and revealed an expression of praise, saying, "Meng Yu, you are indeed a promising talent, very sensible. You didn't let me down. I'm very satisfied with your performance. If your father had been as sensible as you back then, he wouldn't have ended up dead." Speaking of his father's death, Meng Yu silently lowered his head. However, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. The Imperial Advisor continued, "Meng Yu, I will go to Double Dragon City now and capture Shui Lin in person. I will definitely appear in Double Dragon City within 2 days at the latest. During this period, you must do everything you can to keep her in Perching Phoenix Courtyard. If she realizes that something is wrong and wants to escape, you should know what to do." Meng Yu quickly saluted and said, "Please rest assured, Imperial Advisor. I will do whatever it takes to keep her here. I will definitely hand her over to you." The Imperial Advisor revealed a satisfied smile and nodded, saying, "Very good. Meng Yu, with your strength and talent, it is a waste of your talent to only be a governor. After this matter is half done, you should prepare to be promoted to a princess." Although Meng Yu was already mentally prepared, he knew that he would be rewarded by the Imperial Advisor for his great contribution. However, when he heard the words, "promoted to a princess," he could not help but tremble, and his heart skipped a beat. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his excitement. He bowed deeply and said, "Thank you, Imperial Preceptor. I'm willing to serve you loyally until death." "Haha. You are worth teaching." The Imperial Advisor laughed with satisfaction and waved his hand to remove the communication array. Suddenly, the white light screen in front of Meng Yu disappeared. The crystal at the top of the pagoda also returned to its calm and dim state. Meng Yu put away the pagoda and looked at the night sky outside the window with a smug look. He muttered to himself, "Father, although I have already investigated and found out that your death was related to the Imperial Advisor, I can only pretend that I did not know and accept the Imperial Advisor's invitation to be his lackey. I do not have the strength to deal with him. Once I reveal the truth, he will easily kill me. Moreover, the biggest culprit is Lin Wufa. If he did not make such a huge mistake, how could you be implicated? Now, I have sacrificed Lin Wufa's daughter in exchange for the Imperial Advisor's trust and support. Don't worry, I will secretly accumulate power and plan for thousands of years. One day, I will seize the opportunity to eliminate the real culprit." Meng Yu secretly clenched his fists, and his eyes and tone became firm. Unknowingly, 2 days passed in a flash. In these 2 days, Twin Dragon City was not very peaceful. Although Lin Shui lived in the Phoenix Perching Court, she did not rest for a moment. After calming down for a night, she began to investigate the destruction of her parents' tombs. It was inconvenient for her to move alone, and she did not know the situation of the Celestial Beast Empire. Therefore, she asked Meng Yu for help and borrowed a large number of experts and guards. Meng Yu enthusiastically helped and personally led a large number of people to investigate around Twin Dragon City. There was strength in numbers. In just 2 days, Meng Yu found a large number of clues and traces. Although hundreds of traces and clues were presented to Lin Shui, they were confusing and specious. For a moment, she did not know where to start and could not tell whether the clues were true or false. But these were the clues that Meng Yu had painstakingly collected with the help of thousands of people. No matter what, she had to thank Meng Yu for his help. She decided to go to the Lin family's cave and personally investigate some clues. Then she would spend some time and effort to eliminate the useless clues. When she had summarized the useful clues, she would investigate and verify them one by one. At the same time, 3 days passed. Chao Qingyu steered the divine ship and waited outside Twin Dragon City for 3 days, but Lin Shui did not return. According to the agreement between Lin Shui and him, when the time was up and Lin Shui did not return, he did not need to wait any longer and should leave. Chapter 3300. It was morning again, when the sun rose. The azure jade divine ship was hidden in the clouds, floating quietly. Chao Qingyu sat in the cockpit. He had been meditating for 3 days. At this moment, he opened his eyes and looked at the sky outside the window. Thousands of miles away, the ancient city bathed in the morning sun, looking peaceful and peaceful. Chao Qingyu sighed and muttered to himself, 3 days have passed, but Lin Shui still hasn't returned. Is she in trouble? Or is she not planning to come back? According to the agreement, I should leave on the divine ship. Although he said that, Chao Qingyu felt that it was inappropriate for him to leave just like that. However, he was not familiar with Lin Shui and had no reason to look for her. After hesitating for a moment, he made up his mind and made a decision. No matter what, I have to tell young Master Tianxing about this and let him make the decision. After all, Lin Shui is his friend and also his follower. Thus, Chao Qingyu got up and left the cockpit, rushing to the secret room where Ji Tianxing was in seclusion. Standing outside the secret room, he waved his hand and sent a stream of divine power into the door of the secret room. Suddenly, the secret room flickered with divine light and made a special sound. This was Chao Qingyu knocking on the door to wake Ji Tianxing up. Ji Tianxing stayed in the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower and was cultivating in the distorted spacetime. However, he still left a trace of divine consciousness to pay attention to the movements in the secret room. This was to prevent any unexpected events. If Chao Qingyu urgently knocked on the door, he would wake up immediately. Sush. Ji Tianxing, who was cultivating in seclusion, sensed Chao Qingyu knocking on the door. He stopped cultivating and opened his eyes. Only a few days had passed since he started cultivating in seclusion, but he had already cultivated for a year. In this year, his injuries had recovered 80%. He looked full of energy and nothing unusual. Sush. With a flash of divine light, Ji Tianxing left the divine tower and appeared in the secret room. He waved his hand and unleashed a burst of divine power to open the door of the secret room. Chao Qingyu hurriedly walked into the secret chamber and came before him. He cupped his hands and said, "Young Master Tianxing, I apologize for disturbing your cultivation. However, there is something I must tell you. Please make a decision." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said calmly, "You don't have to apologize. I believe that you must have come to me for something. Tell me what happened." Chao Qingyu didn't beat around the bush and said straightforwardly, 3 days ago, I was passing by Double Dragon City on my ship. Miss Lin Shui suddenly came to me and asked me to wait here for her for 3 days. It's up to young Master Tianheng to decide whether to leave or stay." In just a few sentences, he explained the cause of the matter. After Ji Tianxing heard this, he immediately frowned and revealed a thoughtful expression. Celestial Beast Kingdom? Double Dragon City? I remember now, Xuelin's hometown is the Celestial Beast Empire. This Double Dragon City should be her hometown and home. Chao Qingyu also came to a realization and said with a nod, I understand. Miss Lin Shui will be leaving the Tianbei region and even the boundless heaven continent with you. She knows that it will be very difficult to have a chance to return to the Tianbei region, to her hometown in the Celestial Beast Empire. Therefore, when passing by Double Dragon City, she decided to go back and take one last look. But, even if she revisited her old place, 3 days' time was also enough. Now that she hasn't returned yet, I'm afraid that she encountered some trouble? Ji Tianxing nodded his head in agreement and said, You guessed right. She must have encountered some trouble. Otherwise, she wouldn't have not returned until now. You don't know, her background and experience are somewhat complicated. It can't be explained clearly in a few words. While talking, Ji Tianxing brought Chao Qingyu out of the secret chamber and was about to leave the divine ship. Divine King Qingyu, you make a trip with me. We'll go find Shui Lin and see what's going on with her. Chao Qingyu naturally agreed and hurriedly followed Ji Tianxing out of the divine ship. Arriving in the sky, he cast a spell to put away the divine ship and followed Ji Tianxing to Double Dragon City. At the same time, in the Phoenix Perching Court of the fallen Phoenix Mountain. After thinking and deliberating last night, Shui Lin filtered out some useful clues. She decided to go to the neighboring Ocean Origin City and investigate the flowing stream sect master. Because, from the destroyed grave of her parents, she found traces and aura of the Tidal Soul Secret Technique. And this Tidal Soul Secret Technique was only cultivated by a very small number of divine emperors. It was said that the flowing stream sect master of Ocean Origin City had mastered this technique and was very skilled. Shui Lin decided to go to Ocean Origin City and try to sneak into the flowing stream sect to secretly investigate this matter. However, as soon as she left the main courtyard, 8 armored guards with swords came up to her and followed her closely. Seeing this scene, she stopped and frowned. She said with a displeased expression, I'm going out to do something. You don't have to follow me today. Stay in the Phoenix Perching Court. However, the 8 guards turned a deaf ear to her words and continued to follow her closely. Shui Lin was a little angry and shouted coldly, Are you deaf? Didn't you hear what I said? Seeing her angry, the guard captain bowed and explained, Miss Lin, we are under the orders of the city lord to protect you at all times. We dare not slack off. Furthermore, the city lord has instructed that if you have any matters to attend to outside, feel free to let us know. Although the captain of the guards spoke politely and was very respectful to her, Lin Mingya knew that she was not a woman. But Shui Lin was not stupid. She immediately sensed that something was wrong. She gloomily stared at the guard captain and sneered, "You are so loyal to Meng Yu's orders. Are you here to protect me or to monitor me? What does Meng Yu mean? Does he want to put me under house arrest in the Phoenix Perching Court and not allow me to go out?" The guard captain quickly bowed and apologized. "Please calm down, Miss Lin. The city lord did not mean this. Things are not what you think. Go away." Without waiting for the guard captain to finish, Shui Lin angrily shouted and turned to fly out of the gate. But what she did not expect was that the gate, which was originally open, quickly closed with a bang. The bronze gate flashed with divine light. It was obvious that the defensive array was activated. At the same time, the 12 guards guarding the gate quickly rushed over and blocked her way. Seeing this scene, Shui Lin's expression became even colder. She sneered. "Pa, just as I expected. Meng Yu is unaccountably solicitous. He really has other intentions. Who would have thought that after 1,000 years, things would remain the same but people would change? Once the most trustworthy friend, now you want to fight?" As she spoke, her right hand lit up with dark red blood light. A long, narrow, sharp demon knife appeared. She glanced at the 20 guards around her and shouted with a face full of contempt, "You want to stop me with these small fries? You overestimate yourselves." Chapter 3301. Seeing Lin Shui gripping the demon blade, her expression cold, her entire body emitting a shocking killing intent. Those 20 guards' hearts were all in their throats. They all drew their swords and sabers, staring at Lin Shui with full vigilance. They were all celestial deity realm 8th or 9th level strength. Facing Lin Shui, a high-rank celestial lord, they felt apprehensive from the bottom of their hearts. But they had a mission on hand. Even if they knew that they were no match, they absolutely could not shrink back. Of course, these guards were not stupid. They had long secretly sent out a message, informing Meng Yu. What they had to do now was to stall for time as much as possible and wait for Meng Yu to arrive. The guard captain cupped his fists at Lin Shui again and said in a sincere tone, "Miss Lin, you really misunderstood. We absolutely have no ill intentions. We're just following orders. If you have any misunderstanding, please don't be anxious. When the city lord arrives, we'll explain to you face to face. How about it? We're just guards of the city lord manor, insignificant lackeys. You're a magnanimous person, why make things difficult for us?" The guard captain's desire to live was very strong. But Lin Shui did not fall for it at all. Misunderstanding? You guys closed the manor's gates, activated the defensive divine array, and pointed your swords at this lord. You call this a misunderstanding? Enough nonsense. This lord will give you guys two choices now. Either retreat and open the manor's gates, or die under this lord's blade. When her voice faded, surging divine power accumulated in Lin Shui's body. The demon blade in her right hand also released a dazzling blood light, seething with killing intent. The 20 guards were instantly terrified. Each and every one of them had a bitter expression, gripping their swords tightly. The Kenshin soldiers. The guard captain swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Forcefully suppressing his worry and fear, he braced himself and persuaded, "Miss Lin, you mustn't be rash." Unfortunately, Lin Shui's patience was already exhausted. Without waiting for the guard captain to finish, she waved the demon blade, slashing out several dozen streaks of blood-colored blade light, exploding out like a hurricane. Swoosh! In an instant, several dozen streaks of blood-colored blade light erupted in the courtyard like a tornado, engulfing the 20 guards. Only to hear swoosh, 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 swoosh sounds of air tearing sounded one after another. Those 20 guards let out shrill and ear-piercing screams and were immediately minced into pieces. A rain of blood filled the sky. Severed limbs were scattered around the courtyard. filling the air with a pungent smell of blood. In the blink of an eye, the 20 guards were smashed into pieces. They were all dead. In a fit of anger, Shui Lin only used one move to kill them. In a few houses and corridors not far away, several maids saw this scene and their faces turned pale with fright. They screamed and fled in all directions. But Shui Lin did not pay attention to them. She walked through the blood rain and walked to the gate of the manor. She held the bewitching blade tightly and raised her hand to slash at the door. Boom! The 30-meter-long scarlet saber light struck the door with a loud, muffled sound. Above the sturdy and heavy bronze gate, dazzling 5-colored divine light shone, forming a huge wall of light. The blood-red saber light failed to strike the bronze gate, but was blocked by the light wall. The light wall trembled violently dozens of times, flashing with divine light, but it didn't shatter or crack. It was still safe and sound. Shui Lin stared at the light wall and observed it carefully for a moment. She found that it was a supreme monarch-level defensive divine array. With her strength, it was almost impossible for her to break it with brute force. So, she moved her gaze and looked at the walls on both sides of the gate. Although the defense of the gate was strong, she didn't have to go through the gate to leave the perching phoenix yard. Swoosh! She waved the bewitching blade again and slashed out 2 30-meter-long scarlet saber light toward the walls on both sides of the gate. With 2 loud bangs, the walls of the courtyard also lit up with 5-colored divine light, and a thick light curtain appeared. Swoosh! The defensive array that covered the entire perching phoenix yard was completely activated. A 10,000-meter-wide 5-colored light wall covered the entire manor like a sky curtain. Seeing this, Shui Lin was already mentally prepared. She was not surprised. She performed the mystic eye technique and carefully observed the light wall above her head, looking for the nodes and weak points of the defensive array. Time passed silently. Soon, 15 minutes had passed. She finally found the seemingly thick 5-colored light shield above the lotus pond in the 3rd courtyard. In fact, it was an area where the defense was relatively weak. It would be a waste of time to use spells to break the array. After all, she was not an array grandmaster like Ji Tianxing. She decisively chose to attack with all her might. She waved the bewitching blade recklessly and attacked that area. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. She exploded with her strongest divine power and stabbed out streaks and streaks of scarlet saber light toward the 5-colored light wall. On average, she would stab out 4 streaks of scarlet saber light every second without any decrease in power. Within 100 seconds, she had stabbed out 400 times and all of them were focused on one spot on the light wall. She could only hear the muffled sounds of bang, bang, bang. The light wall shook violently and flashed with 5-colored divine light. The vibration of the divine power also became chaotic. In the end, the light wall was withstanding more and more power. It could no longer dissolve or repair itself. Along with a crisp cracking sound, numerous cracks appeared on the light screen, and a washbasin-sized gap appeared. Shui Lin's entire body lit up with divine light. Her body shrunk 100 times and she turned into a beam of light and went into the hole. Swoosh! With a flash of divine light, she left the perching phoenix courtyard and appeared in the sky. Then her body returned to normal size. She held the bewitching blade and flew away. Since there was a problem with Meng Yu, she would not stay, nor would she question Meng Yu. The wisest thing to do was to leave the Double Dragon City as soon as possible. However, she had just flown 2,000 miles away from the fallen Phoenix Mountain. In the sky to the side, a streak of divine light flashed and teleported toward her at an extremely fast speed. Shui Lin sensed the presence of divine power approaching. She quickly released her divine consciousness to check. She saw that the 5 figures wrapped in the divine light were flying in front of her at lightning speed, blocking her path. After the divine light dissipated, Meng Yu and 4 black-armored guards appeared. Those 4 black-armored guards all had strength at the 2nd and 3rd level Divine Lord realm. They followed and protected Meng Yu all along, inseparable like shadows. They fanned out in the sky and blocked Shui Lin's possible escape. Meng Yu looked at Shui Lin with a smile. His tone was still as gentle as before. he asked in surprise. Sister Shui, oh, what are you doing? I let those guards follow you, not only to protect you, but also to serve you. That's why you didn't have to do everything yourself. If you needed anything, just tell them. But you didn't appreciate it. You even killed them. Sigh. At the end of his speech, Meng Yu's face showed that he was hurt. He even let out a sad sigh. At that moment, Shui Lin was dazed and speechless. She even suspected that she had misunderstood. However, she immediately came back to her senses. She shouted with a cold face, Meng Yu, don't pretend to be nice to me. Tell me, why did you try to put me under house arrest? Chapter 3302. Facing Lin Shui's questioning, Meng Yu still insisted on acting. He looked at Lin Shui with a look of surprise and asked incredulously, Younger sister Shui, oh, what do you mean by this? This foolish brother is really thinking for your sake and absolutely doesn't have any malicious intent. How can you slander me like this? Is this still that lively, adorable, pure, and kind younger sister Shui back then? What in the world did you experience in these 1,000 years? Why did you become like this? You even have to suspect your most trusted big brother you? If Uncle Lin's spirit is in heaven and sees you slandering me like this, I don't know how sad he would be. Meng Yu's acting was exquisite and virtually had no flaws. Lin Shui's thoughts and willpower were somewhat shaken as she secretly thought in her heart, did I overreact and make a big fuss over nothing? Seeing Meng Yu so aggrieved, could it be that I really wronged him? Just as these thoughts flashed across her mind, in the sky not far away, another large stretch of 5-colored divine light flew over. Swoosh, swoosh. A total of 6 patches of 5-colored divine light arrived close in front of them as swift as lightning, scattering in all directions, surrounding Lin Shui. After each streak of divine light dissipated, 50 armored sword-wielding guards appeared. A total of 6 teams, adding up to 300 guards. Among them, there were 12 guard captains whose strength reached 2nd-level Divine Lord realm. Without needing Meng Yu to instruct, these 300 guards all drew their sabers, swords, and battle halberds, aiming at Lin Shui uniformly, adopting a vigilant and battle stance. Now that it came to this, it could be said that the truth was out. If Lin Shui still harbored hope in her heart, then she would really be foolish to the max immediately. The atmosphere in the scene froze. Lin Shui withdrew her icy gaze and looked at Meng Yu once more, the corners of her mouth curling into a contemptuous sneer bit by bit. To think that I still harbored that last trace of hope in you, wondering if I wronged you or not. I didn't expect that I was too foolish and too naive to actually believe you, this beast in human form. Meng Yu, what else do you have to say now that things have come to this? Meng Yu froze for a bit but did not feel embarrassed in the slightest. He glared at those guards with furious eyes and ordered, What are you all doing? This seat had you all rush over to provide support at top speed is to let you all protect Miss Lin. Quickly put away your sabers and swords. Don't act like you're ready to fight. If you scare Miss Lin, I won't forgive you. After saying that, he explained to Shui Lin, Sister Shui, oh, you really misunderstood. I sensed that there were sounds of fighting in Chiefin Courtyard and thought that you were attacked by evil people. That's why I brought the guards to save you. Without waiting for him to finish, Shui Lin coldly shouted with disdain, Shut up. Don't call me little sister Shui anymore. You're not worthy at all. You only disgust me. Meng Yu, when are you going to stop acting? Stop wasting time. If you had been straightforward about your intentions, I would have respected you as a man. For a hypocritical and disgusting person like you, this monarch feels ashamed to even say a word to you. The words had already been said to this extent. If Meng Yu continued to act, then it would be too meaningless. He decided to stop pretending, and the sneer on his face slowly faded away. What replaced it was an ice-cold face and a pair of indifferent eyes filled with hatred. Lin Shui, did you know? In order to wait for this day, I have waited for more than 1,100 years. Hao Qian still cares for me after all. You disappeared for more than 1,000 years and returned to Double Dragon City. Did you know? Since your father was killed, You chased after Lin Shan. Not long after you left Double Dragon City, something happened to my father. Do you know why my father was so kind-hearted and never caused trouble, but he was killed for revenge? Seeing that Meng Yu had removed his hypocrisy and revealed his true colors, Shui Lin's heart finally calmed down. At least, she could deal with this matter calmly and decisively without worrying about their previous relationship. But are you trying to say that your father was killed by his enemy and had something to do with my father? Shui Lin stared at Meng Yu coldly and sneered, "Ha! If you say so, then you can always find a pretext to condemn someone." Haha. Meng Yu immediately raised his head and laughed, his voice filled with sadness. That's right. Not only did it have something to do with your father, but your father was the culprit. The sneer on Shui Lin's lips deepened, and she said indifferently, "Is that so? Then I'd like to hear what happened." Meng Yu's eyes were filled with hatred as he glared at her. Because your father, Lin Wufa, betrayed his sect, and even abducted the descendant of an ancient hidden clan. He knew that his sins were grave, but he did not repent and fled to the celestial beast kingdom to live in seclusion. He knew that he had committed an unforgivable mistake and would be killed by his sect and the hidden clan sooner or later. His closest relatives, disciples, and friends would all be implicated. But he hid all this and still called my father his brother. In the end, he was killed by his own disciple and even caused my father's death. Don't you think his sins were so grave that his death was not to be regretted? After hearing Meng Yu's words, Shui Lin was stunned. Her eyes widened, revealing a look of disbelief and shock. For a moment, she was speechless. Meng Yu grinned coldly and said in a mocking tone, "Ha! Back then, he betrayed his sect and killed his own master, then escaped from his sect. Who would have thought that good and evil would be repaid, and the heavens would have reincarnation? In the end, he died at the hands of his most valued disciple. This is retribution." Shui Lin gradually came back to her senses and glared at him fiercely. She asked in a low voice, "You said that my father betrayed his sect and betrayed his sect? And abducted the successor of a hidden clan?" "That's right." Meng Yu nodded, his tone firm. "I don't believe it. You're talking nonsense." Shui Lin shouted coldly. "Ah." Meng Yu sneered contemptuously. Lin Wufa's sect is one of the top 10 sects in the Yunyang region, the famous Dharma sect. And his master was the elder of the Dharma sect back then, the famous Yong He Celestial Lord. As for the successor of the hidden clan, she was the daughter of the ancient Rakshasa tribe, your mother, Sha Yinyun. Meng Yu's tone was resolute and firm. Moreover, he had said it with a name. Shui Lin frowned, her pupils constricting as a cold light flashed in her eyes. What Yunyang region, Dharma sect, and Yong He deity? She did not know anything about them. But she knew that her mother's name was indeed Sha Yinyun. Moreover, her mother's appearance were indeed very enchanting and beautiful, different from the ordinary divines. Not only was her mother's temperament special, her bloodline seemed to be very rare as well. Her father, Lin Wufa, was very obedient to her mother, taking care of her and pampering her to the extreme. In the past, Shui Lin did not know the reason and only thought that her parents had a deep love for each other and were a rare immortal couple. Now that she heard Meng Yu's words, she knew that her parents' identities were complicated and there was more to it than meets the eye. Chapter 3303. Seeing that Lin Shui was silent, her expression complicated. Meng Yu's sneer deepened, and the hatred in his eyes deepened. Lin Wufa was so cruel and despicable. He hid it from everyone and caused the deaths of your mother and my father. He deserved to die. Do you know why Lin Shan wanted to kill him? Stealing your father's dragon sword phoenix saber technique was only one of the reasons. More importantly, Lin Shan inadvertently found out about your father's true identity and the disaster your father had caused. Shut up. Lin Shui's anger had reached its peak, and she shouted with a cold face, interrupting Meng Yu. Her eyes were bloodshot as she glared at Meng Yu and asked, "You took your anger out on my father for your father's death. So, you sneaked into the Lin family's cave and destroyed my father and mother's tomb." Meng Yu sneered. No, it was someone else who destroyed your father and mother's tomb. I was only leading the way for them. Moreover, your father's sins were grave. How could destroying his tomb resolve their hatred? Not only did they destroy your father's golden coffin, but they also dug out his body and burned his bones to ashes. Ha! You must be very angry, right? Is your hatred so great that you want to know who the murderer is and cut him into pieces? Lin Shui's heartbeat accelerated, and her breathing became rapid. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her whole body was burning with a dark red flame of murderous intent. She glared at Meng Yu with venomous eyes, and shouted angrily, Meng Yu, tell me, who is the murderer? If you know your wrongs and can change, maybe I will spare your life. Otherwise, I will cut you into pieces as well. Meng Yu did not take Lin Shui's threat to heart. He was also immersed in anger and resentment. His face was twisted with a cold smile. Lin Shui, do you know? Although my father was killed, I found out the murderer's identity. But the other party's status was too high, and his power was too strong. In order to save my life, I could only pretend not to know and rely on him, enduring the humiliation to survive. In these 1,000 years, do you know what kind of torment I have endured? And all of this is thanks to your father. Lin Shui suppressed her boiling anger and killing intent and continued to ask, no matter what, the dead are gone. You shouldn't have done such a thing. Moreover, there's more to my parents than meets the eye. It's definitely not what you're saying. I believe that my father is definitely not someone who would betray his master. There must be a misunderstanding here. Haha. Meng Yu laughed disdainfully and shook his head repeatedly, disdaining to explain. Shui Lin continued to hold back her anger and asked in a deep voice, my father passed away a long time ago, and now even his remains are gone. You've taken refuge with your father's murderer, and now you're trying so hard to keep me here. What are you trying to do? Could it be that you still want to capture me and hand me over to your father's murderer in exchange for merits and rewards? Meng Yu's expression was ferocious as he sneered, why not? Judging by the time, that lord should be here by now. Shui Lin frowned and immediately understood what he meant. Meng Yu, as early as 2 days ago, when you settled me in the Perching Phoenix courtyard, you had already leaked the information? Of course. Meng Yu did not hide anything and sneered, I've been waiting for this day for 1,000 years. I can't wait any longer. Shui Lin's anger and murderous intent had reached its peak, and she asked the last question. Who is your father's murderer? Why does he want to capture me? What does he want to do? Meng Yu's smile became even more mocking, and he said in a strange tone, don't worry, you won't die for sure. The big shot who wants to capture you is a relative of yours. After all, Cha Yanzi's blood flows in your body. That is the noble blood of the ancient Rakshasa race. Who would be willing to let you die? I see. Shui Lin gritted her teeth and said these 4 words. She did not ask any more questions. Because she knew that time was very tight, and danger could come at any time. She no longer hesitated and waved the demon blade with both hands. Blood-colored blade light filled the sky and slashed towards the 50 guards in the southeast direction. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Blood-colored light burst out, and she turned into a blood-red light and rushed towards the group of guards. The 300 guards were full of vigilance. When they saw Shui Lin suddenly attack, they did not hesitate to cast spells and counterattack. Meng Yu and the 4 guards behind him also did not hesitate to draw their swords and attack Shui Lin with all their strength. In an instant, thousands of divine spell lights appeared in the sky and illuminated thousands of miles of the world. Violent and devastating divine power ripples spread out in all directions, blowing up a shocking hurricane. Shui Lin's figure was drowned, and the dozens of blood-colored blade lights she slashed out were also instantly defeated. In the next moment, she was surrounded by the crowd. Her shield was shattered by the sky full of blade lights and sword shadows, and she flew backwards with blood spurting out of her body. Bam, 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 bam. Following a series of muffled explosions, Meng Yu and the many guards started a storm of pursuit. Thousands of divine spell lights bombarded Shui Lin without stopping, and she was beaten back again and again, her injuries worsening. In just a few breaths, wounds appeared on her chest and back, and divine blood spurted out. Some of the wounds were so deep that bones could be seen. Some of the wounds cut through her bones and blood vessels, and damaged her meridians. Her clothes and long hair were soon dyed red with blood, looking rather wretched. Although the strength of the 300 guards was not considered powerful, they had the numbers advantage. Among them, there were 12 Divine Lord Realm Guard captains. Adding in Meng Yu and the 4 personal guards, there were a total of 17 Divine Lord powerhouses. Especially Meng Yu, his strength reached 9th level Divine Lord Realm, a realm higher than Shui Lin. In addition, he grew up together with Shui Lin since childhood. It could be said that he was very familiar with Shui Lin's family inheritance divine abilities. This led to Shui Lin falling into a disadvantage the moment the battle started, being beaten until she did not have the strength to fight back, her injuries worsening continuously. Even though Shui Lin was very valiant, and her will was very tenacious, she completely ignored her own injuries, erupting with her strongest power, and launched a counterattack in the most berserk manner. But it was no use. It did not help at all. Both sides only fought for around 15 minutes, and she was heavily injured, her strength falling to 60%. Meng Yu took out a simple and unadorned bronze chain again. With the help of the 4 personal guards, he cast a spell and took out this chain. Swoosh! The Supreme Monarch Grade Bronze Chain, with the power to suppress everything, fell from the sky, and quickly tied Shui Lin up firmly, sealing her on the spot. Bastard! Meng Yu, you will die a horrible death. Shui Lin struggled with all her might, but she could not break free from the binding of the bronze chain. She could only curse furiously. Meng Yu sneered complacently, stretched out his hand to grab her, and led the many guards, turning around and flying towards the Phoenix Perching Courtyard. Shui Lin finally escaped from the Phoenix Perching Courtyard. In just a short 15 minutes, she returned to the manor. Meng Yu imprisoned her in the secret underground chamber, opened a divine array to seal her, and let the 4 personal guards and 6 guard captains keep an eye on her at all times. In this way, Shui Lin was really trapped, unable to escape even if she had wings. Chapter 3304. At this moment, the scorching sun was high in the sky. Ji Tianxing, dressed in a white robe, flew across the sky as fast as lightning. Chao Qingyu, dressed in a green robe and tall, followed closely behind him as if he was his fundamental guard. Although the two of them had different strength realms and were far apart. However, Ji Tianxing's aura was mysterious and powerful, which made people feel fearful. As for Chao Qingyu, he tried his best to restrain his God-King aura, not revealing any energy fluctuations. On the surface, he looked ordinary and wouldn't attract any attention. Swoosh! The two of them flew to the sky above Double Dragon City and stopped in the clouds thousands of feet above the ground, hiding their figures. Ji Tianxing looked down at the city below and released an invisible divine sense, enveloping the entire Double Dragon City and searching. He was very familiar with Lin Xue's aura. As long as Lin Xue was in Double Dragon City, even if she was hiding in a secret room or array, he could sense it. Chao Qingyu didn't stay idle either. He also used a secret technique to investigate the situation in the city. Although he wasn't familiar with Lin Xue, but he could clearly distinguish how many god clans there were in Double Dragon City and how many god monarch realm experts were hiding there. About 100 breaths later, Ji Tianxing retracted his divine sense and frowned. Obviously, he couldn't find Lin Xue's aura after searching Double Dragon City. Chao Qingyu also frowned slightly and shook his head at him. Young Master Tianxing, there are 6 god monarchs in the city, but they are all lower god monarchs. There are no upper god monarchs of the 8th stage. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, it seems that Lin Xue is not in Double Dragon City. However, Double Dragon City's territory is very big, so she might be somewhere else. Moreover, her parents settled here back then, so they must have found a paradise to build a cave residence. They definitely wouldn't live in the city. Hearing his analysis, Chao Qingyu nodded in agreement and said, we just need to search around Double Dragon City. That's the Dragon Vein treasure land where divine power gathers, and we'll be able to find Miss Lin. Ji Tianxing nodded and once again released his divine sense, extending it in all directions. Soon, everything within a 15,000-kilometer radius was enveloped by his divine sense and appeared clearly in his mind. The range of Chao Qingyu's divine sense was about the same as his, so there was no need for him to probe any further. A moment later, Ji Tianxing withdrew his divine sense and flew northwest with Chao Qingyu. To the south of Double Dragon City are forests and valleys. To the northwest are lofty mountains and peaks. The divine power there is obviously more abundant. Let's go there and see. As they spoke, the two of them flew across the sky like lightning, heading straight for the mountains in the northwest. Along the way, the two of them released their divine senses to explore the surrounding 30,000 miles, looking for clues and traces. The truth was just as Ji Tianxing had expected. The further northwest they flew, the more majestic the mountains and peaks became, and the more abundant the divine power became. The two of them crossed the mountains and flew for 100,000 miles before stopping above a mountain that was 3,000 feet tall. Ji Tianxing looked down at the giant mountain under his feet and said calmly, "Among the mountains in a radius of tens of thousands of miles, this place has the highest topography and the most abundant divine power. This is the Dragon Vein closest to Double Dragon City. It's very suitable for living and cultivating here." Chao Qingyu frowned slightly and asked worriedly, "Young master, it's true that this is a dragon vein, but we haven't found any traces or clues along the way. Could it be that we're going in the wrong direction? Or perhaps, Miss Lin is very far from here? Double Dragon City's territory is so vast. If we search blindly like this, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack." After a pause, he tried to ask, "How about you try to send a message to Miss Lin and see if you can contact her?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and smiled bitterly. "If I could send a message to her, I would have done so long ago. Why would I wait until now? Ever since she followed me, she's been by my side and has never left. So, I didn't keep her message." Chao Qingyu was startled and smiled bitterly. "If that's the case, I'm afraid we'll be in trouble." As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing suddenly frowned, and a bright light flashed in his eyes. Before Chao Qingyu could ask, he landed on the mountain peak below. He leaped across the surrounding forest and landed on a grassland. A dozen millstone stones were scattered on the small grassland. They looked ancient and weathered. Ji Tianxing was silent. He made a gesture with his right hand and sent out beams of divine light into the air in front of him. Bush, 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 bush. A five-colored light screen lit up above the grassland, flickering dimly. Seeing this, Chao Qingyu was impressed. He nodded and said, "Young master, you're right. There really is a formation here. There must be a cave residence hidden inside." Ji Tianxing only nodded and didn't say anything else. He used a secret technique of the God's Eye and carefully observed the five-colored light screen. In less than 100 breaths, he found a way to break it. Therefore, he made a gesture with both hands and used a formation technique to break the formation. Since he found a cave residence, he had to go in and check it out. Bush, bush, bush. Thousands of divine lights flew back and forth like a rain of arrows and entered the five-colored light screen. Chao Qingyu stood behind Ji Tianxing and carefully observed him. He learned from his experience of formations. Although he was a divine king, he was well aware that his attainments and knowledge in the Tao of formations were far from Ji Tianxing's. Soon, 100 breaths had passed. Ji Tianxing had reached a critical moment in breaking the five-colored light screen. At most, he would be able to break it in a few dozen breaths. However, at this moment, a dazzling divine light came from the sky in the northeast. In the dazzling divine light was a 1,000-foot-long divine warship. The dark golden divine warship was engraved with black patterns and mysterious patterns. It looked mysterious and noble. This was a supreme-grade divine warship. It was extremely fast and emitted powerful waves of divine power. In just 10 breaths, the divine warship flew thousands of miles across the sky and arrived above Ji Tianxing's head. At this moment, the the divine warship suddenly stopped and floated at a height of 40,000 feet. Ji Tianxing only glanced at the divine warship and ignored it. He continued to break the formation. Chao Qingyu frowned slightly and secretly stared at the divine warship. In case of danger, he could protect Ji Tianxing. The golden divine warship with black patterns suddenly opened its hatch and a large group of experts flew out. The leader was an elder with a goatee who wore a purple divine robe and had a sinister aura. Following closely behind him were 4 mighty upper-level divine lords in golden armor. There were also more than 30 middle-level divine lords. They all wore silver divine armor and helmets and held divine spears. These people were all dressed the same and their actions showed that they were well-trained. Most importantly, the armor in front of their chests was embroidered with the same insignia and patterns. Chapter 3305. Including the purple-robed elder, a total of 37 divine lords stood high in the sky, looking down at Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu. One of the golden-armored divine lords saw Ji Tianxing's actions and his expression changed. He frowned, his face dark, his eyes flashing with killing intent. He cast an inquiring look at the purple-robed elder. Seeing the purple-robed elder nod slightly, he took a few steps forward and shouted angrily at Ji Tianxing, "Who are you? How dare you behave so atrociously here?" However, Ji Tianxing did not even raise his head, ignoring his words and continuing to break the divine array. Chao Qingyu merely raised his eyelids, his expression indifferent and indifferent. That high divine lord was disregarded and only felt incomparably humiliated. In his anger, he waved his hand and led the 32 middle-level divine lords to land on the mountain peak. "Bastard! I'm talking to you. Are you deaf? Stop casting immediately, or we'll kill you." With his angry shout, the 32 middle-level divine lords drew their weapons and surrounded Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu. Instantly, the atmosphere on the mountain peak was heavy and murderous. Ji Tianxing was not disturbed at all and continued to cast spells to break the array. However, Chao Qingyu no longer remained silent. He looked coldly at the golden-armored divine lord and said indifferently, "This is the wilderness. What we do here has nothing to do with you. Also, you'd best show some respect. Otherwise, it'll be too late for regrets." His temperament was relatively calm, so he did not care about these Sir Gods. He would not get angry because of this. Of course, if Ji Tianxing gave the order or if the other party insisted on seeking death, he would not mind annihilating them. Not only did the golden-armored divine lord fail to intimidate Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu, he was even warned. This made him even angrier. His face twisted as he shouted coldly, "Where did this lowly brute come from? How dare you be so rude to me? Do you know who I am? Who is this honorable big shot up there? Why aren't you kneeling down and admitting your guilt? Otherwise, your lives will be in danger." Chao Qingyu looked at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, "I don't care who you are. But you guys are too annoying." As his voice fell, he casually waved his hand as if he was swatting away a fly. However, a wild, sacred, and imperious god force suddenly burst out and swept the surroundings. The golden-armored High God Sovereign and the 32 God Sovereigns didn't even have time to react before they were swept away by the terrifying divine power. Bang! Bang bang bang! Instantly, there was a series of dull thuds as the 33 Sir Gods were sent flying by the violent divine power. All of them spat out blood as they were sent tumbling backward for over 10 miles, falling off the cliff. The golden-armored higher divine lord was stronger. After falling off the cliff, just before he was about to fall into the deep valley, he forcefully twisted his body and flew back into the sky. However, those 32 middle-level divine lords were directly knocked unconscious. Like dumplings being dropped into a pot, they fell into the deep valley with a plop sound. Instantly, dust flew into the air around the mountain peak and the deep valley began to shake. The golden-armored higher divine lord was dumbfounded. He completely ignored his wretched appearance and continued to spit out blood from his injuries. He glared angrily at Chao Qingyu and cursed in a trembling voice, You, "You're too audacious." He wasn't the only one stunned. Even the purple-robed elder and the 3 golden-armored higher divine lords standing in the sky were dumbfounded. These 4 experts all had the appropriate foresight and knowledge. They were definitely not reckless people. Of course, they understood how terrifying it was for Chao Qingyu to send 33 Sir Gods flying with a wave of his hand. After all, even the strongest of them, the purple-robed elder, couldn't do it. After coming back to his senses, the purple-robed elder's expression turned extremely dark and his eyes burned with the flames of anger. The other party was in the Celestial Demon Empire but didn't know his status and authority and dared to injure his subordinates. This was simply a provocation and humiliation to him. The other 3 golden-armored high divine lords also had indignant looks on their faces. They couldn't hold back their anger and immediately stepped out, wanting to join forces to deal with Chao Qingyu. Even if they knew that they were not Chao Qingyu's match, they still had to brace themselves. However, just as the 4 higher divine lords gathered and drew their weapons at the same time, wanting to join forces to deal with Chao Qingyu, only to hear a soft swoosh. The 5-colored light screen above the grassland was finally cracked by Ji Tianxing. A gap appeared in the dim light screen, like a door. The purple-robed elder was stunned for a moment and hurriedly opened his mouth to berate, "All of you, get back here for this seat. Don't you find it embarrassing enough?" The 4 higher divine lords hurriedly stopped in their tracks and put away their weapons. They secretly heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly retreated to the purple-robed elder's side. Not only did they not have to send themselves to death, they could also display their loyalty. This feeling was really too good. Of course, after this incident, they were even more loyal. "Go and wake up those trash. Don't embarrass this seat." The purple-robed elder ordered 2 of the higher divine lords with a black face. The 2 of them acknowledged the order and hurriedly flew to the deep valleys on both sides of the mountain peak to wake up those unconscious middle divine lords. At this moment, Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu had yet to enter the cave abode. The 2 of them raised their heads and looked at the purple-robed elder expressionlessly. The purple-robed elder looked down at the 2 of them and said with a dark expression, "Although your strength is extraordinary, don't forget that this is the territory of the Celestial Demon Empire. It's better to keep a low profile when walking here. Otherwise, you will definitely not be able to move an inch." Although the purple-robed elder's words had a strong threat, he had endured it. However, this meant that he had swallowed his anger and would not continue to pester her. He was about to leave. The purple-robed elder knew that the cave abode Ji Tianxing opened was the Lin family's cave abode. He was more interested in the Lin family's cave abode because it might be useful in the future. But right now, he had more important things to do and could not waste time here. Moreover, that god race man in green robes was terrifyingly powerful and his methods were unfathomable. If a conflict really broke out, the outcome would be unbearable. Therefore, after leaving behind these harsh words, the purple-robed elder led the many divine lord guards and quickly flew over the mountain peak. The purple-robed elder was at the front and the 4 higher divine lords in golden armor followed behind him. At the very back of the group were the 32 severely injured middle-level divine lords who were still in a daze. Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu stood on the grass and watched the group leave. They only retracted their gazes when the group disappeared over the horizon. Ji Tianxing said with a calm expression, "This group of people is extraordinary and they are wearing standard armor. They seem well trained. From what the goateed elder said, they are most likely officials of the Celestial Demon Empire. Qingyu, pay more attention to them and remember their divine power aura." Chao Qingyu hurriedly nodded and said, "Don't worry, young master. I've already remembered it. Furthermore, I've also detected that they flew 30,000 miles in that direction before landing outside a manor." Chapter 3306. What happened just now was just a small interlude. Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu did not take it to heart. The most important thing now was to find Lin Shui. Forget it. Ignore them. Let's take a look at this cave first. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and led Chao Qingyu through the gap in the light screen. Swoosh! The next moment, The two entered an alternate space and appeared on a wasteland. Looking around, it was a vast wasteland. There were only sparse weeds and scattered small trees. Further away, there were a few mountains and large forests, but they had all collapsed. It was a mess. Ji Tianxing frowned and released his divine sense in all directions, probing further into the distance. Chao Qingyu could not help but frown and muttered, "Such a harsh environment. Even the divine power is extremely thin. How can it be used as a cave to live and cultivate? Young master, I think this used to be a cave of an expert, but it was destroyed." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "This cave is not big. It has a radius of about 10,000 miles. Let's go to the innermost part. There is something there." With that, he led Chao Qingyu and flew across the wasteland, over the collapsed mountains, and into the innermost part of the cave. Not long after, the two of them arrived at the top of a ruined mountain. There was a small platform at the top of the mountain. There was a mausoleum with a radius of 100 feet and a tombstone that was 100 feet tall. The mausoleum and the tombstone were very new and did not fit in with the surrounding ruins. Ji Tianxing only took a few glances to see the clues. This mausoleum was repaired in recent days. The tombstone was also just erected. Chao Qingyu nodded and analyzed. The surroundings of the mausoleum are dilapidated like ruins, but the mausoleum and tombstone are new. So, someone came here in recent days and repaired the mausoleum and tombstone? That's right, Ji Tianxing replied. Then his eyes fell on the 100 feet tall stone tablet. On the dark brown stone tablet, there were a few lines of dark red words engraved on it. The words clearly read, "The tomb of loving Father Lin Wufa and virtuous Mother Lin." At the bottom right corner of the tombstone, there were 6 dark red words. "Unfilial daughter Lin Shueli." Seeing these lines, Ji Tianxing's brows slightly relaxed. Chao Qingyu was also enlightened. He nodded and said, "Young master, we were right. This is Miss Lin's home, the Lin clan's cave residence. Miss Lin's parents were buried in this mausoleum. She must have returned here 3 days ago to pay respects to her parents and renovate the mausoleum and tombstone." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid things aren't that simple. If she had only come back to pay respects to her parents and repair the mausoleum, she would have returned to the divine ship a long time ago. However, she still hadn't appeared, nor was she in this cave. I'm afraid she met with some trouble, or she went somewhere else." Chao Qingyu couldn't help but frown. He asked worriedly, "Then what should we do? Where should we find her?" Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and raised his eyebrows. He said, "Don't worry, I have a way." After that, he turned and left with Chao Qingyu. They rushed to the exit of the cave residence. 15 minutes ago, in the Phoenix perching courtyard, Meng Yu and 4 black-armored guards stood respectfully in the first courtyard, waiting patiently. After a while, a purple-robed elder with a goatee stepped into the manor with 4 golden-armored high-level divine lords and 32 silver-armored middle-level divine lords. Meng Yu hurried to greet him with a smile. He bowed respectfully and said, "I, Meng Yu, await the arrival of the Imperial Advisor. I also welcome the 4 commanders and the 32 captains of the Imperial Army." Meng Yu was extremely humble and enthusiastic. He was not only respectful to the Imperial Advisor. He even took care of the 4 Imperial Army marshals and 32 Imperial Army captains that the Imperial Tutor had brought with him. The Imperial Advisor was very satisfied with his performance. He nodded slightly and said, "Meng Yu, you are very considerate. Please rise." "Thank you, Imperial Advisor." Meng Yu smiled and thanked him. He hurried to lead the Imperial Advisor into the hall to have tea. Throughout the entire process, he nodded and bowed with a flattering expression, not feeling the slightest bit of shame. The 4 Imperial Army marshals secretly sneered. The 32 captains of the Imperial Army were originally seriously injured and in a bad state. They were depressed. Now that they saw Meng Yu's attitude and how respectful he was to them, they felt much better. After the Imperial Advisor sat down, he wasn't in the mood to drink tea. He asked directly, "Meng Yu, is Lin Shui still in this manor? Did she notice anything unusual?" Meng Yu hurriedly bowed and answered with a smile, Imperial advisor is wise. Lin Shui is not stupid. She noticed something was wrong early this morning. She brutally broke through the defensive formation and escaped from the manor. However, I was prepared and came in time to intercept her. Now, she is bound by the soul-suppressing chain and suppressed in the secret chamber of the underground palace. Very good. The Imperial advisor was obviously relieved. He hurriedly got up and walked out of the hall. Let's go. Take me to find her now. Meng Yu was startled and hurriedly persuaded, Imperial advisor, you don't have to worry. Lin Shui is seriously injured and sealed by me. It's impossible for her to escape. You are a noble and peerless 10,000 vehicle body. How can I let you go to the dark underground palace to find her? Please wait here for a moment. I will bring her up and hand her over to you. The Imperial advisor thought for a moment and felt that he was too impatient. He was not calm and dignified enough. So, he pretended to cough twice and deliberately put on a calm and dignified posture. He nodded and said, well, Meng Yu is considerate. Go and do it. Meng Yu hurriedly bowed and retreated. He hurriedly rushed to the secret chamber of the underground palace. In less than 100 breaths of time, he carried Lin Shui, who was covered in blood and in a sorry state, back to the hall. Plop. Meng Yu did not have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. He threw Lin Shui heavily on the ground and reported to the Imperial advisor, Imperial advisor, I have brought Lin Shui here. Please deal with her. As soon as he saw Lin Shui, the Imperial advisor's eyes were fixed on her and could not move away. Well, you can leave. He waved his hand and let Meng Yu step aside. He looked at Lin Shui with a dignified gaze. At this time, Lin Shui was tightly bound by the soul-suppressing chain. Her divine power was also sealed. She could only sit on the ground and could not resist at all. Her blue dress had long been dyed red with blood, and her long hair was draped over her shoulders, covering her face. Although she was seriously injured, she was not unconscious. She was still conscious. Hearing Meng Yu's words, she looked up at the Imperial advisor and then looked at the commanders and captains of the Imperial Guards. Imperial advisor? The Imperial advisor of the Celestial Beast Empire? Lin Shui frowned and her face was full of anger. She thought to herself, this person is a peak monarch god. There are 4 upper monarchs and 32 middle monarchs. Looking at their attire, most of them should be the elite Imperial Guards of the Celestial Beast Empire. If I fall into the hands of the Imperial advisor, even if I have great ability, I will never be able to escape. It's over, I'm dead for sure. Sword breaking the 9 heavens. Chapter 3307. Under such circumstances, Shui Lin's heart was filled with sorrow and despair. The white-robed, black-haired figure in the depths of her mind became clearer and more imposing. At this moment, a thought flashed through her mind. Tianxing, if you could come in time and save me, wouldn't that be great? Of course, this thought was fleeting. She knew that it was indeed a bit reckless of her to return to Double Dragon City. Other than Chao Qingyu, she hadn't told anyone else. Chao Qingyu wasn't familiar with her and wouldn't care about her safety. Now that 3 days had passed, Chao Qingyu must have left Double Dragon City on the divine ship. As for Ji Tianxing, he must still be cultivating in seclusion. Chao Qingyu wouldn't dare disturb him. Even if Ji Tianxing was a peerless genius, he couldn't predict the future. How could he come to Chifen Court to save her? At this thought, only bitterness and regret remained in Shui Lin's heart. At this moment, the advisor waved his hand and sent out a beam of golden light. It blew away Shui Lin's messy hair and lifted her chin. Shui Lin, raise your head. Let me see you. Even though Shui Lin was extremely unwilling. However, the golden divine light held her chin and lifted her head bit by bit, allowing her to look into the eyes of the imperial tutor. Although her expression was gloomy and angry, and her face was stained with blood. However, after the state preceptor observed her for a moment, he suddenly grinned. You really are Xia Yanzi's daughter. You look exactly like her, at least 80% similar. Shui Lin frowned and asked in a low voice, You're the advisor of the Celestial Beast Kingdom? What do you want? I have no quarrel with you. The advisor smiled meaningfully. Shui Lin, since you know who I am, you should know that you have no chance of escaping once you're in my hands. No quarrel? Looks like your father hid everything from you. Even you were kept in the dark. He deceived his master, destroyed his ancestors, and even abducted our clan's successor, causing our clan to suffer huge losses, and almost half of our clan was destroyed. Tell me, I have an irreconcilable enmity with your father. How can you say that there is no enmity between us? Seeing that Shui Lin was silent, the national preceptor deliberately pretended to be amiable and said in a gentle tone, "However, your father has already received his retribution and is dead. The dead are gone. I will be magnanimous and will not pursue his sins any further. It's just that your mother originally had a bright future ahead of her. She could have become the saintess of our clan and led our clan to glory. Unfortunately, she was muddle-headed and committed an unforgivable sin. She caused our clan to suffer heavy losses and even lost her life. Of course, your parents have already passed away for over 1,000 years, so I don't want to pursue the matter any further. You don't have to hate me so much. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. After all, you and I share the same bloodline of the Rakshasa clan. In terms of seniority, you still have to call me uncle." Shui Lin was stunned for a moment, then she sneered disdainfully, "Uncle? Pa, I only have father and mother. I don't have any bullshit uncle. You're even less worthy." The national preceptor's face darkened. The corners of his eyes twitched and a trace of haze flashed across his eyes. An Imperial Guard commander next to him very sensibly raised his palm and shot out a few rays of divine light, slapping towards Shui Lin's face. "Audacious bitch! How dare you be rude to the national preceptor? Your sin is unforgivable." Slap, slap, slap. Following a few crisp slaps, Shui Lin's cheeks immediately swelled and bled. Blood also flowed out of her mouth and nose. The national preceptor waved his hand hypocritically and said with a compassionate attitude, "Forget it. Commander Wu, you step back. No matter how disobedient Shui Lin is, she is still a disciple of our clan. How can I bear to blame her?" Shui Lin watched his performance and ridiculed mercilessly, "Old thing, don't pretend here. It's really disgusting. You let Meng Yu capture me. What scheme do you have? Don't tell me that you want to acknowledge me as your family. That will only make people laugh their heads off." The national preceptor was so angry that his eyebrows twitched. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He finally understood Shui Lin's character. He could only suppress his anger and said in a deep voice, "I just said that you don't have to worry. I won't kill you. I came to Double Dragon City this time to take you away and acknowledge your ancestors." "Bah!" Shui Lin said fiercely, "Don't be so self-righteous. My parents are dead. I have no relatives and I'm not from the Rakshasa clan. You just hate my parents, but you don't have a chance to take revenge, so you take it out on me. If you want to torture me to relieve your hatred, you'd better give up. I would rather kill myself than let you have your way." The national preceptor immediately sneered and said confidently, "I don't want to say it again. You're in my hands. Your life is no longer in your hands. If you accept your fate, you'll suffer less. If you're stubborn, don't blame me for being ruthless." Then, the national preceptor formed a divine spell with his right hand and activated all his power. He struck out a dazzling divine seal. Swoosh! The complicated and mysterious seal drilled into Shui Lin's forehead like a special symbol. Shui Lin realized that something was wrong. She wanted to dodge and resist, but she couldn't. After entering her forehead, the special mark that was flickering with blood-colored light merged with her godhead and hid itself. Although the special symbol didn't erupt with power for the time being, she didn't know what effect or threat it had. But Shui Lin didn't need to guess to know that it could control her life and death. Chapter 3308. Meng Yu stood at the entrance of Perching Phoenix Courtyard with 4 guards, watching the Imperial Advisor's divine worship leave. It was only when the divine warship disappeared into the horizon that he retracted his gaze, the smile on his face fading away. He frowned and muttered to himself, "Strange, why is the Imperial Preceptor flying south? He should be heading north to return to the Imperial City, but he's flying south. Doesn't that mean he has to leave the Empire and enter the Cloud Yang region in the south?" Meng Yu's face darkened when he suddenly thought of this question. He cursed under his breath, "Damn it! That damned old fox, he's most likely bringing Lin Shui to the Cloud Yang region to deal with the Rakshasa tribe. Once he's done with the Rakshasa tribe, he'll return to the imperial city of the Celestial Beast Empire and help me become a princess. I wonder how long I'll have to wait before I can become a princess. If something happens to that old fox, or if he stays in the Rakshasa tribe and doesn't come back, won't my efforts be in vain?" Thinking of this, Meng Yu's face darkened even more, anger rising in him. However, his ability was lacking, and his status was low. No matter how angry and unwilling he was, he could only suppress it. After all, he had a favor to ask of the Imperial Advisor, and there was nothing he could do. After taking a few deep breaths, he calmed his anger and said coldly, "Let's go back to the residence of the city lord." As he spoke, he was about to fly into the sky and return to Twin Dragon City with his 4 guards. However, something strange happened. There was no sound behind him, and no one answered him. Puzzled, he turned around subconsciously, only to find that the 4 black-armored guards were gone. Meng Yu was shocked, looking around vigilantly, searching for the black-armored guards. At this moment, a few black shadows descended from the sky and landed beside him, stirring up a cloud of dust on the ground. Meng Yu looked down and saw 4 lifeless corpses lying on the ground. Even though there wasn't a single wound on their bodies, not even a drop of blood could be seen. Their deities had long been shattered, and their souls had been obliterated. There was no doubt. These 4 corpses were his most loyal bodyguards. Meng Yu froze, his face pale, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. For second-level Divine Lord Realm guards being killed was not considered a very horrifying thing. The real horror was that the 4 guards had been killed right beside him. They had died without a sound, and he was completely unaware of it. From this, it could be seen how powerful the person who attacked was. Who was it? Come out. Meng Yu pulled out the divine sword with a heart full of fear, tensed up all the nerves in his body, and searched around for traces of the enemy. At this time, he saw that there were 2 figures 10 steps in front of him. One of them was a handsome young man in a white robe with a head full of black hair, and the other was a tall and ordinary-looking God Clan man. The 2 of them, one in front and one behind, stared at him expressionlessly like master and servant. Meng Yu immediately tightened his grip on the divine sword. He stared sharply at the white-robed youth and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you? Why did you assassinate my guards? I don't know you, so I don't think I have any grudges with you, right?" Without a doubt. The 2 people who suddenly appeared were Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu. When the 2 of them left the Lin family cave mansion, they went to Double Dragon City and sneaked into the City Lord's mansion. Ji Tianxing planned to control the Double Dragon City Lord and interrogate him for clues and information about Lin Shui. If the other party didn't know, he would order the Double Dragon City Lord to use all his power to find Lin Shui. After all, the Double Dragon City Lord was a local tyrant. He could mobilize countless spies and informants. But unfortunately, the Double Dragon City Lord was not in the City Lord's mansion. Ji Tianxing caught the housekeeper and used a little trick to interrogate the whereabouts of the Double Dragon City Lord. Knowing that the Double Dragon City Lord was in the Phoenix Perching Court, he remembered that the purple-robed elder and many Imperial guards had entered the Phoenix Perching Court. So, he and Chao Qingyu hurried to the Phoenix Perching Court. The 2 of them hid in the dark and investigated the situation in the main hall. At that time, Lin Shui was bound by bronze chains and sat paralyzed in the main hall, covered in blood. The Imperial Advisor made a special mark and injected it into Lin Shui's godhead, controlling her life and death. Chao Qingyu wanted to attack decisively and force his way into the main hall to save Lin Shui. But Ji Tianxing noticed the abnormality and realized that this matter involved a lot of people and was complicated and strange. So he and Chao Qingyu hid in the dark and continued to observe. It wasn't until the imperial advisor left with Lin Shui that he and Chao Qingyu showed up and killed Meng Yu's 4 guards. At this moment, the two of them looked at Meng Yu with cold and merciless eyes as if they were looking at a dead man. Meng Yu was intimidated by Ji Tianxing's power and felt a chill on his back. Ji Tianxing ignored him and said to Chao Qingyu, "Take him down. I'll interrogate him as we go." Chao Qingyu nodded without hesitation and raised his right hand to grab Meng Yu. Meng Yu realized that something was wrong and teleported without hesitation, trying to escape. However, Chao Qingyu's seemingly ordinary claw locked down 100 miles of space and suppressed Meng Yu. Meng Yu couldn't move at all and his body was frozen in place. He could only be captured by Chao Qingyu. Chao Qingyu flicked his fingers and shot out 9 beams of godly light into Meng Yu's body. Suddenly, Meng Yu's godly body, godhead, and godly power were sealed as if he had been petrified. Other than being able to speak and think, he couldn't do anything else. Chao Qingyu took out the imperial-level ship and followed Ji Tianxing into the ship. Then, he drove the ship away from the perching Phoenix Court and flew south as fast as lightning to catch up with the imperial advisor and Lin Shui. He handed Meng Yu over to Ji Tianxing and Ji Tianxing took him to a dark secret room. Plop. Ji Tianxing threw Meng Yu on the ground, then casually pulled over a divine jade chair and sat down in an imposing manner. He stepped on Meng Yu's face with 1 foot and looked down at Meng Yu. He said coldly, "You are the Double Dragon City Lord? I don't like to waste time. Tell me honestly, what is your relationship with Lin Shui? Why did you become the imperial advisor's lackey and murder Lin Shui? You only have 1 chance to answer after you think it through. If there is any falsehood, I will make you regret being born into this world." Although Ji Tianxing didn't get angry, the invisible pressure made Meng Yu very frightened and cold sweat broke out all over his body. He showed a pleading look and begged with a sobbing voice, "Senior, please forgive me. Please don't be angry. I have no enmity with Lin Shui and I don't want to harm her, but I have no choice but to follow orders." Before Meng Yu could finish, Ji Tianxing's eyes turned cold. He flicked his right hand and shot out a ball of purple fire into Meng Yu's right palm. Suddenly, his entire right palm burned fiercely and his flesh and bone turned to ashes. The incomparable pain made Meng Yu's body twitch and his face twist as he let out a heart-wrenching scream. Moreover, after his palm was burned to ashes, the purple fire didn't weaken at all and spread up his wrist. Meng Yu was tortured to the point where he wanted to die and his mind was about to collapse. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.